Start the meeting and thank our vets. Yesterday was Veterans Day. We've got a very busy agenda tonight, so let's just dive right in. First, approve the meeting minutes from October 15th. Hopefully everyone has a copy. Vote to approve the meeting minutes? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next is public comment. Dan, would you like to start?
Hi, I'm Dan Meyer with the Environmental Advisory Council, and I just want to take a minute and update you on a few things we're starting. We're very much in the infancy of these ideas, but thought they're interesting related to stormwater. A few years back, we put together a greenhouse gas reduction plan, and in there was a section about developing a sustainable parks policy. And just looking at, are there things that could be done to lessen impacts, whether it's, fertilizer, pesticide, herbicide use. And one of the things we mentioned is, are there opportunities to do less mowing in the township in our parks? So my understanding is there is some talk with the township staff about looking for a suitable location to maybe do a little pilot study on this. And so in addition to the less mowing, less fuel use, less noise, less air pollution, we get some stormwater benefits from that also. So I'm also looking into some possible grant opportunities for that. So we might be able to rustle up some money to help with that. I also found an organization that gave me some real numbers on what it would take to put a meadow in, and I'll share those with you, Steve. I was surprised how low it was. The other thing that came up is Fenimore Woods, the pond at Fenimore Woods, and I believe maybe a resident may have expressed concern about the algae in there, and I know that we've contracted someone to come in and apply algicide like it's done down at the Willows. And there are these old beds over there that were installed a while ago but have long ago failed as far as I can tell, and I think Steve would agree. So I've just offered Steve, I'm happy to lend whatever expertise I can there to see if we can improve. My personal feeling is we need to get more water cycling through that pond. It's just, there's a bit of there is some coming in from the creek that sort of bypasses around the pond, but it's really just kind of a trickle right now, and that fluctuates depending how much water's in the creek. So. And
where are the beds that are failing?
What's the road there? Is that Chamonix? Yeah, Chamonix.
Chamonix?
Yeah. So between the pond and that road, just sort of uphill on of the bridge. We're two rectangular beds, and we're not sure. I suspect that maybe water was being pumped out of the pond and sort of cycled. They called them reed beds.
Yes.
Paul Basic at the last EAC meeting said that these things were actually just lined with asphalt. They were like, impervious beds, and then somehow the water from the pond was being cycled through this. But they've just completely silted in, and the pipes have failed. And
so is that, wasn't that a Boy Scout project? I feel like it was.
I don't know. We've been looking for, and Commissioner Nagel has given us some help on that. Trying to find out.
That's what I remember.
Best that we can find out, they've probably been inoperable for 7 years.
But so is that something that can be just, if it's asphalt lined, resurrected?
Well, that's what we're looking at.
Potentially. The issue with any stormwater BMP is then you got to maintain it. So I think we want to look at, is it a good solution? Is it going to be sort of a constant maintenance headache? Is it doing the job when it works?
The default, as he said, is we could always use an herbicide, but we're trying to look at obviously the other ways.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to mention one other thing. I'm on the steering committee of Radnor Bird Town, which is a program of the Audubon Society, which is trying to promote increased backyard bird habitat. And a member of that is also Phil Wallace. He's the executive director of Pennsylvania's Audubon Society chapter. And he's working with an urban planner who specializes in sustainable backyards and landscapes. And I know the two of them have some ideas and that's all I know. They're trying to set up a meeting with me and want to talk to me about how I might present this to this group and the EAC. But I'm excited that, I think that maybe they're thinking along the lines of some of the incentives that I know you already have in place, but maybe there's some other ideas they have. And then just the last thing, as of the third week of October, we were looking for another EAC member. Someone stepped down just due to job commitments. And Radnor Birdtown's always looking for people to join the steering committee. So if your plates aren't full enough, you're welcome, or get the word out.
We're looking for people too, but thank you.
Okay, all right, thanks a lot. You guys are great.
Thanks, Dan. Is there anyone else for public comment? Okay. Let's move on. Dan has a great slide presentation. And by the way, Dan, you did a magnificent job Monday night to the board. Really put everything in a nice summary and perspective for not only the board, but the public. So thank you.
Thanks, Heather. So I just have a few slides tonight. Just wanted to start with a quick recap for those that maybe missed the board meeting the other night. This is the updated concept plan for Banbury, Francis, and Windsor, BFW. I presented a couple different options that vary depending on how much storage we want to provide here, whether it's a 25-year 1 hour, which is about 2.4 inches, the 10-year 1 hour, 2 inches, or the 5-year 1 hour, which is about 1.8 inches. So different options here, each with somewhat less storage, somewhat less depth required, and area required. I think someone noted at the last SWMAC meeting that utilities were an unknown, and obviously that may come up in the design phase of this project if it gets to that. And so one of these options may need to be explored at that point. So less storage to make way for utilities. So I presented these updated costs and flood reduction percentages. And so we gave a low and a high-end cost for that project, depending on the option, and then the corresponding reduction in flood volume, local flood volume, depending on the storm event. So the 25-year option, so storage for the 25-year storm, that'll obviously reduce 100% of the flood volume up to the 25-year storm, whereas the first option, say for the 5-year volume, would reduce the 25-year storm volume by about 56%, just to give you an idea. Commissioner Curley had requested, I think, some kind of visual tool or indication of what those reduced flood volumes would look like, and we are exploring options to put that together. So any questions on that? Just wanted to recap.
I mean, as far as the high-low, do you want to elaborate a little on that?
Oh, sure. So, very conceptual level, obviously, this design. We applied a plus 20% and a low of minus 15%. So that's fairly standard for a conceptual cost of this nature, just to provide a range, given the uncertainty that's associated. Does that answer your question?
And these are construction costs, not design?
That's correct.
Right, okay.
Madam President, I do have one question that I guess it was several meetings ago I had asked that we look at, the 25-year storm at a minimum. Does the commission or Dan feel there's any value in looking at greater storms? So I just, because I want the public to understand that when we get that 50-year storm, everything's still going to inundate. It's going to be great help on all the other storms. So I just pose that question to you and our consultant and say, is it worthwhile to look at larger storms, or is everybody comfortable with the 25? And maybe I look to Dan to show if you could give us something maybe at our next meeting. It doesn't have to be, immediate, to determine, what in a given year or the past 5 years, what frequency storms have we had? Because that might be able to help the commission say, well, if the really severe ones were this, we need to look at a greater one, or this is going to capture a huge amount.
I mean, in my opinion, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think a larger storm, if we can afford it and it's in the budget, I think a 25-year storm is definitely something that we should consider. Out of curiosity, to see, obviously the bed would be bigger for a 100-year storm, but if the difference in price isn't that much more, I think we almost need to compare, like for the 25-year storm, it's this, just out of curiosity, how much of a jump in the price would it be if we went to a 100-year storm? But I think at the minimum, I think a 25-year storm is a good halfway point between addressing severe flooding, but then that significant reoccurring 2, 5, and 10-year flooding that happens. If we're going to do it, I think we need to entertain the idea of doing at least a 25-year storm.
Dan, can you go back to the costs?
Sure.
I mean, we're looking at, double the cost if we're going from a 5 to a 25. And I think we have to keep that in mind because we do have multiple flood sites throughout the township, limited budget, and if you could solve twice as many storm locations for the 5-year storm, you're getting more, your money's working harder for you. The reason being is that the 25-year storm is so infrequent, and the flooding that we have, it tends to be almost like a flashy flooding, So, some of those things, we just have to kind of keep that all in mind. And it depends, like say at this location, I'm in support of option 3. The reason being that this takes the load off of the downstream system as well. So it's not solely for this location that you're providing that additional storage. So it works harder for us when we're in these locations. So I think you can't have a blanket 25-year, 100-year. I think it's got to be case by case. Look at the configuration, what's the land that you have available to you. Utilities are going to come into play here. Maybe 25-year isn't going to be feasible because of the additional cost, because we run out of space. We know we have some space because there's a system there already. So I'd be cautious. I mean, we could have a goal of 25-year, but I'd be cautious to make that a fixed, standard.
Sure. And I'm not sure if this is something that needs to be decided at this stage, or if this is something that at the design level can be determined.
I think that's something at the design level, because when they get into the project, they can come to us and say, you know what, even if we wanted to, we could at best give you a 25-year storm because of utilities, because of depth, because of inadequate infiltration rate. And I think you're almost microengineering it at this point. I think the information you provided was enough so that we're comfortable at this point that, hey, this is a project that we feel is worth doing. But I agree with Regina, it is going to be site-specific. If we can, though, I think a 25-year store is a really good goal, considering budget, location, but...
And just for a comparison, I think Hurricane Sandy was on the order of 2.2, 2.3 inches. Now, that was not over an hour. And I didn't include the photos here, but at the board meeting, we had the photos of this site I think, during Hurricane Sandy, and actually there was maybe another storm in there as well, but... the other thing I meant to mention, Commissioner Schaefer, I think her main comment was that she actually liked the idea of the bioretention. So taking up part of Windsor, closing that off, and putting in a bioretention there. That was something that Commissioner Schaefer, I think, wanted the SWIM Act to reconsider.
And I don't know if that's entirely up to us. I mean, I think that's something that the township has to decide if they're going to close a road. And if that's something the township and the residents want, then obviously we want to put in a BMP there. Mm-hmm. Whether we close the road or not, any opportunity we can do best management practice, we could. But I think the township and residents need to decide first, to make that call before we can say, yes, we can do it, or no,
Well,
we can't.
honestly, I don't know that we can justify the additional cost and loss of efficiencies on this location. Obviously, we want to see that type of work where it makes sense, where you have extra space and things like that. You know, you can put in bioretention facilities for very little money if you're not tearing up a road to do so. And already this is, you're going to have to establish that whole ground. You know, this is compacted roadway. It's not ideal location to start that kind of a project. You know, we're not going to get the money that, we're not going to get the value out of our money if we pick locations that are very difficult. I hate to use the middle school as an example. When we decided to build our middle school on that site, that drove the cost. If we were to build that middle school somewhere that didn't used to be a lake, I'm sure the construction cost wouldn't have been $50 million or whatever it ended up being. So that's the kind of thing where you have to be patient and wait for the right location and the right opportunities so that we can get our dollar value.
Virginia, you had said loss of efficiency. Would you just explain what you meant by that?
Well, the type of facility that you're putting in there, a bioretention area is not going to have the same type of storage. In this case, it's a peak flow issue, I think, that we're dealing with. Different flooding for different reasons at different locations. In this case here, this is not flooding that's going to occur the day after a rainfall because there's a very long time of concentration and it ends up there. It's happening while the rain is still coming down, and then it's gone shortly thereafter. It's not the type of thing that it's typical for Radnor, though. So that's the kind of thing we have to think about, the type of flooding that's occurring there and how to best address it without really exhausting our resources.
Great. So just moving on to Runnymede and South Wayne, a little hard to see, but that's Area C from our flood model. It's about 109 acres, mostly residential. I think we remember this image. This is from the flood model again. That's showing the area of inundation. I think a question came up the other night from a resident whether or not that was necessarily an accurate portrayal of reality. But that's at least what we're getting in the flood model based on the digital elevation model, the digital elevation data that exists. And we talked about targeting these two public parking lots. The one to the west, owned by the school district, the one to the east is a township parking lot. I think, Regina, you had mentioned that. You thought that was school district. So this is the concept plan we came up with. We have a model for this using EPA SWIM, so a little bit more of a detailed model. Since we do have more storm data in this area, we have that from the old base plans that were developed for the Radnor Middle School project. So a lot of this information is known. So we are still in the middle of modeling this. So I just want to note that we don't have final results yet. But the idea here is we would have a system that could start up on West Wayne with new inlet. We believe we might actually be able to pick up both sides of West Wayne in the system, but right now the concept plan is just showing the south side. Runoff would enter in, and it would kind of cascade down a series of stepping storage chambers, ultimately coming into a larger chamber at the bottom. We did see some opportunities to integrate some green infrastructure into this, some bioswales. Currently, this is just a relatively flat asphalt area. There's no trees, there's no landscaping. So there's an opportunity there to break it up a little bit with some bioretention, some bioswales, possibly some new trees along the western edge.
Hey, Dan, if I may ask you a question. Did you show, so the library parking lot is above that South Wayne lot. Were you intending on coming through there?
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because they're currently in the design stages for the library expansion. And what I'd have to say, and I'm not speaking for the board or the manager, but these plans would have to be well advanced enough so that it would not affect the library construction. So my request would be to think of an alternate method of not coming down that stretch, other than what will come down. And the library is going to do some certain amount of stormwater also, but now would be the time to talk to the library. And the reason I'm saying this is because if the project goes as planned, that library building will go out over top of that parking lot. That's what the sketch plan shows. So once that occurs, you're not going to be digging, underneath that and through that, and it would probably be a concern of maintenance should we ever have to go back in there. So I want to let you know early on in what you're doing that may not be a good option, only because of the construction.
What are they doing? Like, how are they addressing stormwater? If they're going over the parking lot, where are they proposing stormwater measures?
They have not gotten to that point yet. They're in the very, very early stages of design. They're going to do stormwater, but like I say, that's not even designed. But I wouldn't want to see all the design work that CH2M does and says, hey, we have this great plan, and well, there's now a library that goes out over, over the parking lot. And it would be a lot of waste of their resources.
That's an excellent point for any projects that we're doing. Obviously, we need to, coordinate with any other interests, as well as partner with them. If they have to put in stormwater for their project, we may be able to partner with them. It doesn't, where you're showing the pipe doesn't need to be where the pipe is, obviously. So, but if there's going to be construction being done in that area, I don't know, is there going to be parking left at the end? Or is it going to be a driveway?
It'll still be a driveway because the library will span the parking lot. So you would still come through there. Sorry. The library will span the parking lot. So you would drive under that new addition. So the parking
It's like
lot,
a second floor addition.
correct. So the parking lot, it's not a cantilever, it spans because it's supported on the one end. So
there's still opportunity there if we were to partner with them to use that underground space.
right, my big concern is they're trying to move full bore ahead. It's still in the very early stages, so I just don't want Dan a year from now to say, hey, I've got these great plans to show you, and now it would be a moot point in tearing all that up.
Oh, yeah, obviously now's the time to start talking to them.
Yeah, so we were really just looking to maximize the space, and that's what we've done here. I think we can still get significant storage in just this, the southern parking lot if we eliminate that part, but we'll certainly take that into consideration. So in Runnymede Ave, there's an existing culvert. It's a small, I believe it's a 3 by, say, 2 arch culvert. Eventually, it ties into the larger culvert that runs through the middle school site, the old brick arch culvert. So we would propose 2 diversion structures off of that. These are structures with weirs that would divert the flow into both of these parking areas where the water would be stored, possibly infiltrated, and then flow back into the system. So providing some, hopefully, infiltration, some detention. And like I said, we're in the process of modeling this. This is kind of a graphic from our swim model showing some of the pipe networks that we know exists. Have information, like I said, as we get closer to the middle school, we have more detailed information. Some of these outlier pipes, we do have some diameters and inverts, and we were able to use that.
Dan, there's some of those inlets that are in, I don't know if you have them in your system or not, in grass areas. And they're not really functioning very well. And there are some inlets and even sometimes manholes that surcharge. So that's something you're going to want to kind of find out a little more about, because the system is so overtaxed. The pressure from upstream is actually coming out of inlets and out of manholes in those locations, especially near the library. There's something in that section between the library and that, I think, school district parking lot.
Okay.
That surcharges. So
That's the kind of thing we
just
need
an
to know.
FYI,
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, and I might be able to kind of walk around there and kind of figure out where it is and kind of give you a little more.
Perfect. I should mention too, I think there were some discrepancies between this piping layout that we got from the old base plans from the middle school project and what the township data is. I know there's some discrepancies, I believe specifically in this area here. We deferred to the base plans from the middle school projects. But that's something
Was there a survey done recently? I thought there was some survey.
Chagrin Valley did survey. Originally, they were going to do a study here, and we pulled that from them, but they did a certain amount of survey work, so I had them send that to Dan. So he didn't duplicate any efforts.
Right. And there's some overlap, but that's mostly up in here near the fire station.
Okay,
So that's mostly
because
up in this area.
for instance, in the parking lot, do you have grades in that parking lot? Do you have good grading? Because that's got some crazy grading going on in there, so.
In this parking lot?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay, good.
That was part of the survey
Yeah,
for the middle
you'll need
school.
that information.
Yeah, I said it was flat, but what I meant was it was, and just a sea of asphalt, essentially. But yeah, there is some slope to it, you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the reason the township has been waiting for this for so long, and that's the reason why, one of the reasons we haven't spent a lot of money on that parking lot, because it was always anticipated that there would be a parking lot with green and trees and no long, it wouldn't look like it does. So this is music to a lot of us here for sure.
That's the thing too, when we are considering proposals, obviously we're trying to incorporate pedestrian safety, green space, obviously, as we talked, the bioretention facilities, things like that, in order to, make it make sense for the community, not just, if you might as well get the most for your money.
That's a great point, and that might even be an issue along South Wayne here. There's really no defined sidewalk. It just kind of blends right into the parking lot. So the idea of creating landscaping, again, bioswales, that kind of defines the sidewalk, I think, a bit better. This just gets into a little bit more of the detail of the model and the different pinkish lines there represent kind of the different cells of the storage element as it's stepping down. So again, if we had to eliminate the flow from West Wayne, we could possibly just be looking at doing these two cells here. And this cell here in this parking lot, that can also expand. It can go further back. There's some slope to that as well, but it's a little bit flatter. And that's really all I had. Like I said, we are developing cost estimates for this. I hope to have more. Actually, at the next meeting, definitely we'll have that further developed. Just wanted to lay out some of these thoughts first. Get any feedback?
Yeah, it does. And I think there's the pipe system that is kind of like just, I guess you would say, north of that apartment building. It's kind of where you have the edge of that, the 368.5 number in that vicinity. That I think that has some issues. So that might be able to, you might be able to redirect some of that over to take it out, take it out of the system like you were doing in the other locations.
And we can also provide the results of the model with only this, the school district parking lot and with the township parking lot, with both parking lots together, to give some options there.
Madam Chairman, if I may make a request. So is in the emails I sent out, we have a very limited window for preparing any changes to the 5-year budget. In reality, we have to complete it tonight, and I have to submit it tomorrow. So I would request, if the board, if it so pleases the board, that we go to the budget portion. We have Dan's spreadsheet set up on the laptop, so we can physically adjust things with this board. You can see it live, and you can vote on it tonight. And then I can submit that to Bill White, and we could go. And not to, but I just thought maybe ODP could get very long, but we have,
It won't take that long, actually, but.
we have literally no wiggle room on this. If the board wishes to amend this budget, we have to do so tonight.
Could I go back to Runnymede for a second before we end with that? I understood that we were looking to go upstream, and so why aren't we looking up the hill from this place as we have done with Banbury Way?
I think we're looking at available space in this case.
And also, I think it was a bit of a safety issue. There's flooding at the school, there's flooding at the firehouse, so on top of of just the flooding in general of that area, it's a bit of a safety concern as well.
But I understand what you're referring to, Paul, is that you would like to see it done uphill.
Yeah.
But in this location, Dan, I don't think you identified anything for potential locations any further upstream of this that I'm aware of.
That's correct. I think
In
in
your
terms
original-
of publicly owned parcels, there's really not all that much. We could do a lot in the right-of-way. It's just, it's not going to be the most efficient means to store water. So there really wasn't a whole lot beyond the right-of-way in this area, unfortunately. And mostly residential. There's the Wayne Arts Center, which already has BMPs that I assume are still working. Actually, that needs to be incorporated into our model.
Madam Chairman, if you do wish to go to the budget,
Yeah, I think we should, if they need something by their next meeting, and then we'll hop
and I just
right
have
away on Paul's.
a very quick presentation to go over some items on those 3 projects I mentioned to you folks, and then you can,
I think before we even talk about the new projects, maybe we need to understand what we're moving where on this list, because
I don't know that you're going to move anything, but it's incumbent on me to bring this commission things that come up. So
right, no, I agree. I kind of want to understand
and-
what has to happen
Right,
on this
and you
sheet.
may not wish to change anything at all.
So there was a little confusion with how things went on Monday, I thought, as far as if it's on this budget and the budget is approved, then we don't go to the,
No, right, so you said exactly. So right now.
that correct?
That is one of the pages of the 5-year capital plan. And if that goes Monday night and goes through the process and is approved, your 5-year budget as shown is approved. The only reason I brought this up was because at the meeting, I think that you folks watched, there was some additional modeling that was requested of Dan. And then the question gets posed to the commission, would you like him to include the ability to do that in some of the other studies you have asked him to do, which could conceivably change that price, conceivably?
Well, let me ask a more general question. And that is, if our 5-year plan changes next year, because the whole thing is very fluid, we don't know what we're doing right now, really, then what?
Well, so right now, if that the assumption is that the 5-year plan is, let's say that stands, and the board says, this commission says, we don't want to make any changes, this is fine, this is what we're going to the commissioners with. In that respect, you are bound by that plan in that you're saying we're going to do this study, this study, this study. It's the fluid part of your plan is in the out years when you say, we have projects to do based on that study. That's somewhat of a nebulous topic because until you do the study, you don't know some of the projects you're going to work on. But, so I'm going to take, for example, I have other portions of the 5-year budget. Once that is approved, it doesn't change next year. I mean, you could conceivably go to the board, but,
Yeah, but
that's how it's voted on.
I hear that, but, I mean, to ask us to pin down the next 5 years right now seems absurd, because we're not in a place where we can talk about anything with any intelligence.
No, so the first year is always your most specific. So
Sure.
2016, this commission should have no problem in very well giving a very tight, cogent budget for 16. It's fully understood by all that those following 4 years are somewhat fluid because you will be generating things from the studies that you're having done next year. And I think everybody's aware of that. So my concern, my request was, if in those studies you wish Dan to do additional modeling, as was brought forth, he may need to change those numbers. Second to that, it's incumbent on me to come to this commission with issues I find, right? So you may or may not wish to do that. And the final answer to Paul's question is, if, let's say next year Dan does his study, and through that study, unforeseen conditions are encountered, and he could say, I'm going to be able to do this study, but due to these unforeseen conditions, it would be an out-of-scope fee for me to proceed in this fashion. You can always submit that, and we can always go back to the board. That's not a problem. But
This is major. I mean, we're going to do township-wide flow studies to determine and prioritize projects.
Correct.
That we don't even know what they are now. So to say right now we're supposed to pin the next 5 years to this budget, I don't get it. I don't see how we can do this at all.
well, like I said, what you have is fine. I mean,
So I have worked in places where you put a 5-year budget together, and then in the second year, we put another 5-year budget together, and that's approved. Is that how this works, or is this a 5-year for 5 years?
well, in my world, as a staff member, 5 years is 5 years. But this commission, and again, I'm not speaking for the board or the manager, it is known, and it has been said at board meetings, we understand the fluidity of the situation we're in, and that you are so early in the process. And everybody is aware that, we have Darby Creek watershed analysis, Meadowbrook Run watershed analysis, and Gulf Creek watershed analysis. We all understand that once those analyses are performed, it's going to open up everybody's eyes as to possible new projects, new hotspots of flooding. Knowing that in the summer of 16, I would ask this commission to start working on the 17 budget with the data we've gotten from Dan and further refine those 4 years. It's actually going to take some time until, as Paul said, that 5-year is a real 5-year. But once a lot of these studies are done, you're going to have your bucket to pull from and say, wow, we have these very specific items. So I think everybody understands your concern, and that's why your budget is what it is listed as it is. I mean, we say various projects, so we don't know the projects, and that's why it's on there. My only other request is, again, like I say, it's incumbent upon me to take to you, this commission, things that are brought to my attention or that I find. So if it would be possible, if I could have 5 minutes to run through those 3 projects I gave to you, and then board can do the ODP, however you want to work it, but if we are going to make changes, we do need to do them tonight.
Yeah, I think if we have to make a budget change and there's something that you need us to look at and we have to consider, then I think we should hear it.
Very good. Yes, thank you. So, all right, I'm just going to make this quick. So I try to send as much information as I can, even though we don't have a whole lot. So I'm starting this with, this is our Stormwater Management Advisory Committee. From the 2016 Township Manager's Recommended Comprehensive Budget Version 1, that's where your current 5-year capital lies. It's not as clear as I would like, but that's why you have a copy at your desk. Okay, so moving from that, everything I just said. So if the Stormwater Committee wishes to revise the capital plan, it must be submitted by tomorrow. Discuss possible modeling, and maybe that's not even an issue for what we have. Review and prioritize 3 items for the budget, and that gets fit. I do make a recommendation, and that is only a recommendation to you folks. So this is a rudimentary watershed map. And the project that we talk about, 31 Highview, is at the very top up here. It's almost out of the township in the Gulf Creek watershed. This over here is the Maplewood Avenue eroded swale, and this over here is actually Mill Dam. So you can see 2 of them are in the Darby Creek watershed, 1 is in the Gulf Creek. Darby Creek watershed hasn't gotten as much attention as some of the others because Dan did this fantastic job on the Ithan Creek modeling, and we all know the Gulf Creek watershed, that's always been a hot topic. So the Highview Drive outfall, and that's actually wrong. It's not in the Darby Creek. It's in the Gulf Creek. My apologies on the typo. So I don't know if you can tell, but if you look here, there's a manhole sitting up about 18 feet higher than the pipe. So these exist in Radnor, and they exist in many other townships. They're outfalls from our storm sewer system. They're in people's backyards, and they're put in 30, 40 years ago, and nobody knows they're there, and they pretty much go unnoticed and unattended. And over the years, as that stormwater comes out of that pipe, it starts to erode under the pipe. Maybe there wasn't an end wall, maybe the pipe just ended, and it starts to erode. And as it does that, these pipes will drop off. Also, so if you look, if we go to the, that's just more pictures of the same. This is standing on the manhole looking down into the swale. So obviously this was on somebody's radar some 13 years ago because Mominy was hired to perform a survey of that swale that goes all the way out to Arden. I'm not suggesting that we address the entire swale at this point, but it was an issue. So these swales not only take water from the outfall pipe, usually the land is sloped that way, so there's overland flow that goes to these. And this was brought to our attention by a resident who lives on Highview, who asked us to come over and take a look at this, and we all said, wow. It's very tough to access. It's between a house and a driveway to get there. There's, as imaginative as we can be, there are ways to address these swales. Paul's thought, reduce the volume of runoff to the pipe. So usually these outfalls are connected to an inlet at a low point in the road and is taken away. So conceivably, you could work uphill of that, try to reduce flows, try to infiltrate. That's part of it. You can pipe the outfall. You can pipe a piece of it. You could pipe it completely. Some pipe, in this case, will have to be replaced. You can plant it. You can armor it. You can have check dams. You can have micro pools. There's a million things you can do on these swales. Got to reshape the swale. At one point, part of it was a trapezoidal swale. Now it's just totally eroded, and it's erodible soils. Or all the above. So what I thought, my recommendation to this board, one of the ways we seem to we trip ourselves up is we try to give project costs before any amount of time has been spent on design. So it's a somewhat nebulous number. It's based on some actual facts, but that's not including a lot of the things we find out when we actually start to design. Do we need an easement? What does that entail? How hard is the permitting? What's the access going to do? So my recommendation and my request to this committee would be we would fund design only in 2016. As part of that design, a project cost will be part of that. A probable construction cost estimated by the engineer. So we could conceivably do the design in 16. When that design is done, we come back to this committee with an estimated probable cost of construction, which you can then plug in 17 or wherever. On Highview, I'd asked for $45,000 because that swale is considerable. I'm not saying we need to address the entire swale at this point, but at a minimum, we need to address the swale where it is between the two houses. And I think we need to go down, further down, as you saw, that goes to Arden Road, and do certain BMPs within the swale.
Steve, can I ask just a general
sir.
question here? So this is on private property?
The outfall comes out in a resident's yard, yes.
And so, again, I don't know. What is our responsibility?
It is our pipe. It is our responsibility to maintain that pipe and maintain that outfall. We have not found any record of an easement for that at this point. That doesn't mean we're still not responsible. It just means it went in and no easement occurred. But it is, make no mistake, it is our pipe and it is our responsibility.
Is it a prescriptive easement?
Very well could be, but every time I say that, our attorney tells me to practice engineering and not law. That's the first thing that comes to my thought, that it's been over 20 years and a day, and it is a prescriptive easement.
So how far down do you have to go? And the only, like, down the slope to fix this, I mean, the only reason I'm thinking just from a legal standpoint is we own the pipe. But if we don't have any easements or anything, what's not to say that we do something if we had to, like, right at the source? I mean, it's private property, so you kind of go down, not to, pun intended, a slippery slope here, but you are in that.
Well, that would be the minimum part of the project. If we just make a repair, whatever that repair is, right at the rear of 31 Highview, that's fine. The high end of that project would be we go down through that swale, and I'm not saying we would reshape and regrade the swale, but I think at certain points in there, we may wish to do something, whether it be a check dam or do some other items to slow down some water and try to stop some of the erosion.
So it's more an erosion, it's not necessarily a stormwater or flooding or anything more than, it's just
Well,
an eroded swale.
Arden Road bears the brunt of this eventually, so it does affect another road of ours. If you've ever been out there in a really big storm, Arden Road does take some water. The immediate need is to take care of what is really a safety issue at this point, in that we have, a rather sizable hole in somebody's backyard, and it's our pipe.
Well,
Would you guys consider that this falls under our repairs and upgrades to stormwater infrastructure?
Oh, this is definitely an infrastructure project.
Yeah, so we're budgeting for that each year, and I kind of think, I like what you're saying, but I kind of think we could fit this in as part of the study and concepts, and then move forward in 2017 under repair upgrades to stormwater infrastructure.
And you
And it
bring up
could
a great
exceed
point.
that dollar figure, but we're going to get a better idea in 2016. Do we have to up that number?
You bring up a great point, because you have money based on the studies to do things. The only thing is, your study has a finite number as provided by Dan. To be able to construct in 17, if you wish to fund it, you need to fund the survey, the permitting, the bidding documents, and that, if you want to do that as part of your study, that will take away from your study.
well,
I was saying that would be one of our, like, if we were going to go follow the same approach, we would select a few concepts to
Yeah,
advance, and that may be one of those concepts to advance.
My only concern, so a concept is like a sketch, right? And that's
A
gonna-
sketch with a rough cost estimate, so we do have a better idea.
And then would you wish to construct the following year? Because somewhere in there, we have to go from sketch to hard engineered plans with bidding documents, the permits, easements, no easements, the whole 9 yards. I just, and it's only a request to this board, but I don't want you to think you're going to go from, we'll include a sketch in his study, which is very conceivable. He brings up some ideas, but that sketch brings us nowhere near construction.
Steve, I'd like if you could go through the other two, talk
Absolutely.
about the total cost, because I think the issue is the overall cost in the repair and infrastructure part of the budget, which seems to be consuming a large part of the $1 million that
It
we
is.
have. So, I mean, I think that's part of our big issue, is that, yes, there are a lot of things to repair, but the question is, when is it going to happen? And it's not going to happen in 2017 as the way it looks right now because of everything else that's in the pipe.
And that's what this board's, absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head. This commission's job is to prioritize and put forth to the Board of Commissioners what you feel is the best way. I only alert you to some of these because there are safety issues, or they were brought to me as safety issues.
I think, too, if we're going to do something in this area, first of all, it's private property. I think if we're going to be paying for it, we need to then definitely discuss with the homeowner an easement, so we're
Well-
not going to have to go through this again.
If there is no easement, part of the plan would be when we were done, or actually, I'm sorry,
So-
before we even started, we're going to need a permanent easement, and based on the configuration of where this is, we're going to need a sizable temporary construction easement. But that would all be part of it. Whenever we step into anything, I don't mean it that way, whenever we step onto anything at this point, what Heather brought forth, it will be the case. We will obtain easements. We will not move forward on anything until those easements are in hand, signed, and at the courthouse.
The other thing, before we move the next project, is I would like to see maybe what becomes of that study, because if it's an opportunity that we can fix erosion, but we can also handle stormwater, I'd be hesitant to just throw money out there. If there's a real danger and immediate need and we need to fix 10 feet or fill a hole, I mean, that's a safety issue. If it's something that's a township pipe that's created, it is one thing. But before we put money for this, I think we should see what the stormwater study yields. So we could take the opportunity to do BMPs, do some sort of stormwater measure, even if it addresses 10% of the stormwater. If we're going to do something, I would like to see what Dan has to say before
I highly suggest that.
I just say, here's 50 grand, let's fix it, let's be smart about it.
I highly suggest that. We actually have a purchase order out to do a very short-term temporary fix, but on further inspection of it, it's a very touchy situation because of the depth. We might end up actually putting up a fence around it, just for, and I don't mean to say that in a flip way, we may have to fence this off because it's deep. I mean, I could bring a contractor in and in essence fill this hole with riprap. You know, it's a very cheap, very rudimentary way of dealing with this. You know, you bring it up with soil and then you fill it with riprap, and we could do that to a point.
And I think let's hold that thought, but let's see what the other two projects
Sure.
are, because that could be at least a temporary solution to fix safety. But before we jump into anything further on that, I'd like to see what that study
So,
yields.
This was the Maplewood Avenue outfall. Again, this was brought to our attention by a homeowner who was selling their home and said, hey, by the way, when we were walking our property, we noticed this. So this is another eroded swale. It is not to the depth of that other swale. And this is maybe 4 feet in some cases, maybe a little deeper. The difference here is you can see it's running through backyards, okay? So again, many ways to mitigate this. And I'm talking about all the different BMPs that you can do. You can pipe this, you can armor this, you can do check dams, you can have BMPs throughout, you can pipe, there's just a million things you can do. And I think we could get very creative in something like this. Now, this again is the recipient of water from an inlet at a low point on Maplewood. My request is that we do look uphill of that, try to do some type of reduction above this. So then maybe we do some stormwater reduction, and we still have to address the swale. But I just think there is a multitude of ways. 20 years ago, we would have gone in there, we would have created a trapezoidal swale, and we would have lined it with R6 or R7 for 500 feet. And that would have been it. And I think we have the opportunity to do something real special with these.
And which watershed? Is this Darby? Or is this,
Yep.
or is this
Hold
Gulf?
on, let's go back to the map. So
it's
yes,
Darby,
these two are in
okay.
Darby. The other one is in Gulf Creek. Both of these, well, the next one, Mill Dam, is in.
So Steve, again, these are private properties?
Correct? Well, no, actually, this one comes out partially on Odoricio Park.
Do we have an easement on that swale?
We have found no easements
Oh.
on these swales, nothing recorded.
And wouldn't this fit into what Heather was talking about before, where once we get a picture of Darby Creek, then we can develop an overall plan that might fit into this?
Absolutely, but we do need to just, I guess, admit to ourselves, we have issues. So I think the model's going to bear that, but
But so what can be done as far as safety, just to make it safe?
well, this is a little different.
It doesn't look as deep and it looks flat. It
4
doesn't have a
feet.
hill.
There are concerns from the residents around there. They are concerned with their children. This would be a lot tougher to try to fence because it would be very odd to fence so much of this. So I think the study's going to show that we get sizable flow down here. But we don't need the study to tell us we have this eroded swale that is a concern to the residents that live around it. And where we place it, or where this commission places it in the scheme of things is going to be up to you. Again, so this one was another one where I said I would request that we do whatever we need to do as far as bidding documents, design, survey, all that good stuff next year, and then move to, in that process, we would get a probable estimated cost of construction, and then go into 17. That's just my recommendation. But I don't have a recommendation on the construction because I don't know what we're going to do. The next one is Mill Dam. I'm assuming everybody's familiar with the Mill Dam, right? So Maplewood Avenue, which runs along Mill Dam, is actually the dam embankment. And about 2 years ago, I noticed the road settling, and we did some investigation, and we really didn't see anything. I saw it again last year, and it brought concern to me. So we went to the board, and I asked to have Gannett Fleming come out, had some geotechs come out and take a look at it, and we further refined that and requested a proposal for their dam group to come out and see what is wrong with this, which they did, and you do have the report, and the reports are on the back table. So just real brief. The bottom line is there's an abandoned, I think 33-inch, what we call stovepipe that runs through the middle of the dam. It's leaking, it's causing the subsiding of the road. They provided some numbers for, let's get back up. They provided us with numbers in that report. So they said the permitting, design, and bidding documents would be roughly $45,000. And the construction, they gave a range of 150 to 200. I used the 200. And on a project like that, we would have to have daily inspection all day. You know, we can't do dam work with partial inspections of somebody stopping by every couple hours. Again, my recommendation to this committee would be that in 2016, we move forward with that design and permitting to get this project done. This is another safety project, and I'm not trying to alarm anybody, but obviously, if the dam failed, that would be problematic to the people downstream. We actually do have a plan for that, and that's required by DEP. What occurs if the dam starts to breach or fails? And then my request and recommendation would be for 2017, we move forward with the construction and inspection, which would be at $220,000. And
So is this a township's responsibility, or
It
does the
is.
Mill Creek, does a club hold any responsibility? Does DEP consider them to?
no, this is ours.
So the
Mill
roadway
Road-
is the dam.
Pardon me?
The roadway is the dam, and it's
That
a
is
township
correct.
roadway.
Correct.
So it's fully owned by the township.
And there's actually a sluice gate, and the documents, we do have an agreement with Mill Dam, and we're actually responsible for all them. We pay for that, the annual maintenance of that gate to make sure it raises and lowers, but actually a gentleman who works at Mill Dam is the one who raises and lowers it, because he lives 300 feet from there.
Do we have what hazard dam this is?
It is not a high hazard dam.
Okay. So is there any residential in the inundation zone?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
There
if
is.
this dam failed downstream, there's homes that would be inundated. Like I say, we actually have an emergency.
There are
action
homes
plan.
that would be inundated? Because then wouldn't it be high hazard then?
I don't believe it's classified that way by DEP. I may be wrong. I don't have well, actually, I didn't put them in here. There are DEP inspection reports as part of that report, and that's where it would be listed. But a high hazard dam, so Earl's Lake, right, is a dam that they've been trying to decommission for 5 years. And it has issues, and it is considered a high hazard dam. That doesn't mean there's threats to life and limb, although there are people that live literally feet from the spillway. So that term high hazard is used differently in the dam world. But no, make no mistake, if this dam were to breach in a heavy storm or fall apart, that would be problematic downstream.
Regina, just explain the implications of high hazard versus what, low hazard? I mean,
Well, usually you have the different classifications. A high hazard dam usually has the threat of safety downstream and failure of residents.
But there is, like
So
I
we
said,
should clarify that with,
So if it is a high hazard dam and if it failed, people would be, their lives at risk, then we may need to, right now, look at lowering the water surface elevation just out of
wouldn't-
precaution.
I wouldn't get carried away on the high hazard, the terminology. You do need to know we have an emergency activation plan. If the dam fails, there's downstream notifications to to evacuate people. Make no mistake about that.
Probably is high hazard then,
You know,
yeah.
make no mistake about that. But I wouldn't worry about lowering the dam at this point. That wasn't a recommendation, that report, and I give some credit. Those people are dam people. That's what they do every day. But we do have an issue that we need to address, and it states clearly in there that this issue must be addressed. And I think I'm stretching it as long as I can to say design in 1 year and construction in the next.
So of the three of these projects, this is clearly the highest priority for you.
My recommendation to this board, absolutely, this is the highest priority. There's no doubt about it.
I have to agree with Paul. I think this is the highest priority, and we already have $160,000 budgeted for year 2016 for the Mill Road culvert.
That's a different culvert.
Oh,
That's a different project.
That's in
So-
Bryn
That's a
Mawr.
different
So what
one.
I'm,
Okay.
what I'm wondering here is,
Oh, that's Mill.
is there an interim measure to stabilize whatever it is that's, I mean, can we go in and, you know, what is the construction plan? Is it to remove the pipe, to fill it, to
Correct.
line it? Does it need to be there to function?
No.
It's
an
not the low-level outlet?
It's an abandoned pipe. It's in the report. They go to the point of showing.
Wasn't it 15 feet down? Was
Yeah,
that-
and they give you the side slopes of the walls and how they think that will be constructed, you know, the way that excavation will take place. And they're calling for complete removal and backfill of that pipe.
Would it be less expensive to fill it?
It could conceivably be if we used flowable fill, and I'm not speaking in any way for the engineers because we can't speak for each other. I don't know their assumptions. My gut feeling is, the concern is, when you use flowable fill, it is very hard to 100% fill a pipe when you try to do that. So when you have an abandoned pipe and you try to do that, there has to be enough head to really get that out and through. So I'm taking what they said at face value, which was their recommendation is to replace it, and I'll just go with that. I'm not saying there's always more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak, but I'm just going with their recommendation. I think it's a valid recommendation, so.
Yeah, I do have a concern about that cost-wise. I think it would definitely be worthwhile to look at that as an alternative. What do you guys think of filling it? Because a lot of times that's what's done. If there's I assume it's a CMP pipe, a corrugated metal?
It's what they call, it's an old metal pipe. If you've ever seen them, they're from long before any of us was born, even an old guy like me. So it's sections of pipe that are riveted together, and that's why we call it stovepipe. It's literally.
Okay, so it's not, okay, yeah, so it has joint issues as well.
Now, see, we didn't, it's not televised, so we don't know, but we know that pipe is there. And if you read that, it tells you everything lines up that it's this pipe, you know, because we have the plan that shows the pipes there. The subsidence of the road is directly on top of it, and and they actually have they did a little profile of the dam and pipe on a piece of graph paper that's part of it.
well, could we do this? We have, under repairs and upgrades to stormwater infrastructure, $200,000 for years 2017 to 2020. Could we take the 2020 and throw it to 2016?
Absolutely.
And move that up, since, I mean, we don't know really every year what it's going to be, but if there's an immediate need now, and there's an emergency plan that's in place,
Then what are we giving up because you look at, there are a number,
why couldn't we move that up?
there are a number of repair projects that are in 2016. Just because they're broken out doesn't mean they're not repair and
But we
infrastructure
could,
projects.
right, but what I'm saying is, could we slide something to another year to move?
Well, yeah, as long as we move something somewhere else,
Oh,
I'm fine with
absolutely,
it. But
yes.
to say that we're going to do all these plus that,
No, you'd have to swap something, yes.
Yeah, and we have to make sure Mr. Weibel can make all these numbers work based on our income, as he has done. And the one thing is, I don't, and I'm not speaking for, but my dealings with DEP is, this permitting can take some time. I don't know that we would physically get the design and permitting done, the design, permitting, and construction done in 1 year. If we can, that would be fantastic, because this would be off the books. So the reason I split it was to give time to do the permitting, do the design, do the permitting, have the bidding documents. You know, literally January 1 of 17, we go to bid, and we get this thing done.
Steve, what would it take to assess Regina's suggestion about filling?
What I'll do is I'll contact the dam engineer tomorrow, and I'll send him an email, and I'll share the reply with this committee.
'Cause otherwise, you're talking about closing that road, and that's a pretty big
absolutely.
burden on the school district, because all their buses for Wayne Elementary use that as a route. Not all, but half.
And we would work with
I
the
use it
school
every
district
day,
well
yeah.
ahead of time. We would let the school district know.
Because pretty much all of the students live that other side of, you know.
And I agree with Regina wholeheartedly, but there's going to be some projects we do once in a while that the road's going to be closed and they're going to have to follow detours, and it's not something we want to do.
Yeah, but if we plan it for the summer, then obviously that's not an issue.
Exactly.
But you have the club there, obviously, that's a problem for them. So I think that filling the pipe, I'm very in favor of, because of the, you know, just the impact to our community, if it's more cost-effective to go that route.
What I would ask this committee to do, and I will find out, I will email that gentleman tomorrow, what I would ask this committee to do is base their decision or movement on the prices that I provided. If we can do it for, you know, half the price, fantastic. That'll just be another project you can do in the year you did it. But I think for the purpose of your budget, your capital budget, we need to base it on what we have in hand. If that plan works, that's fantastic.
So, Steve, from your perspective, what of the repair projects can be shifted back in time that are currently listed in 2016?
So if we look in 16, you have the storm sewer locating, televising, and cleaning. And Paul, this really kind of goes to your point in one of those emails. We don't like all these surprises with the outfalls either.
No, I wouldn't. I'd be fine with keeping that where
And
it is.
I'd request that stays in.
Yeah.
We have the Malin Road culvert, again, heavily traveled road. I think that needs, my recommendation is that needs to stay. Mill Road, again, another failing pipe in amongst our roads. The North Wayne Basin and outfall, we have that price there. So right now, for those of you who have watched or attended the board meetings, the Board of Commissioners have sent a letter to the school district, you know, to request working out details of being able to do so on that ground, because everybody knows that's school district ground. I don't know what to tell you about that project and you know, its start date. Various culvert studies. Again, you know, there's so many years, and Radnor is no different than all the other townships and counties. There were so many years when a lot of stuff wasn't done, and unfortunately, it's coming home to roost on us with these failed pipes and culverts. And you know, part of it is now that, you know, I'm doing inspections. I've been doing that for the last 4 years, so we're becoming aware of them. You know, that's part of it. So
you're not really answering my question.
now I'm
Well, wait,
working down the line.
Before we go down the line, so just food for thought, Steve. So we're already putting money, you know, we have lots of these pots that we're supposed to, you know, divvy out money. We're talking about an immediate need at Mill Dam. We're talking about Malin Road. We're also talking about Mill Road Culvert.
Right.
You're spending a really big chunk of change, which I'm not denying is needed, but would we need to do the 45,000 every year for the next, you know, like, could we move 45,000 from the culvert studies, at least in this year, towards like the Mill Dam one?
Well, you can
Because I think
figure
we've kind of spent a chunk, and we've already looked at several culverts this year.
we've done exponentially more culvert studies
Right.
in the last 2 years than have ever been done. So if you want to look at it that way, I mean, so I look at it from an asset management standpoint, and I come to you and say, you know, as from an asset management standpoint, we should be doing this annually. We need to go through all these, but we have to come to reality. There's not enough money to do that all the time. So Gannett is in the midst of these culvert studies right now. who knows what we're going to find, and I might be coming back to you in January and saying, here, I'm sharing this study with you. Oh, by the way, there's 3 culverts that need to be addressed. So I think it would be more than prudent to push back the culvert studies and be able to, that's a great point, Heather, and use that money towards all these things we're finding.
That would be just Mill Dam, right? Isn't that the cost for Mill Dam?
Well, Mill Dam.
Just for design, though, because
Right.
I think if you were going to go with something where you're just filling the pipe, that could be done much more rapidly, getting a permit and.
Again, I think
So we would
need
be, have to be, like, consider, we may need construction money next
Right.
year for it.
So
So we
let's-
have to, I think we need to take a different approach, and I think we need to be less specific in some instances, and instead of saying Ithan Creek, Banbury Way, Francis, Ithan Creek, this, that, and the other thing, we should really be more general, because at this point, there's no way we can decide these things without more information. We just saw that project tonight.
Well-
And we have to be prepared to fund that for construction if it's feasible.
But don't forget, you
So
can.
you want to just take this big list and shrink it to maybe 5 or 6 items?
Yeah, I think what makes sense is to maintain the storm sewer locating, the Malin Road we already know, and the Mill Road we already know. And then even the North Wayne Basin, take the title out of there and just combine all of those construction projects and just flood control or safety, I don't know how you want to word it, but it would cover things like a potential failure of a dam, as well as construction of a stormwater basin, because there's no reason to tie ourselves up.
Isn't this all just infrastructure, repair and improvement?
Well, I guess flood control's a little different than repair.
You have.
So you have to be a little careful, because that is a repair job, that dam. However, installing the project at Banbury Way, that's not necessarily a failed system. That's an enhancement
Well,
of an existing system.
No, I thought we did have a distinction between infrastructure repair and capital improvements. And Banbury, I thought of as a capital improvement.
And it is a flood mitigation project.
I think we could just be more careful with our terms and get everything we need covered, and then make those determinations as the information comes our way. That's what I'm trying to get to.
I only have one concern. So the Board of Commissioners was very specific that 3 projects come out of Dan's study, right? Wasn't that part of it?
They don't all have to be constructed in year
No,
2016.
But I think it would be prudent to, based on that, to physically list them as opposed to having a nebulous title that says,
But Steve,
It's
Regina
not going
gets
to
back
happen,
to the
though.
issue.
That's not going to happen. We're
Right.
not, Midland Avenue has got to go. We don't even have any concept there. Like, that can't stay on the
But we
list.
do-
Yeah, Steve, I mean,
We
this
have to
gets at the
change that.
specific issue that I was talking about, that we're trying to be too specific too soon. And I think Regina's approach is good, because it says, let's back out 1 or 2 levels and just say, here's the general places we want to be, so that we're not boxed into a corner with a budget.
Can I make a suggestion? So we've got various studies for various watersheds. So for instance, for like the Ithan Creek watershed, could we not lump that into Ithan Creek flood reduction projects? Because realistically, we're not going to be able to do Banbury Way and, let's say, that parking lot next to the library.
Yeah, it's really only to be one.
It's gonna be one.
And there's no reason at this point to even say it has to be Ithan Creek. Why? Just because of terminology? We may intend to do that, but with more information, it may not be the wisest choice. So why not allow for additional information to inform our decisions as we move forward? I know we want to do certain things like the storm sewer, we have engineering design already slotted for Malin Road, things like that we've already really, those are far ahead of what we're, looking at today. And that way, we keep ourselves flexible enough that we know what's going to go towards repair, what's going to go towards improvement, and then what's going to go towards additional data acquisition. It could be studies, it could be survey, it could be videotaping and cleaning. I don't know, how do you guys feel about that?
May I add one thing? So getting to Paul's point, and I think maybe this is Regina's point also. So it is very, very aggressive. We have listed here the Radnor Middle School connection, Banbury Way, Francis, Midland Avenue. All three, well, let's just go to the two, the middle school and Banbury Way. Two sizable projects. So we have to say conceivably, will they get done next year? Will that occur? Will they get designed and everything in place? Because we have Banbury budgeted to get it done, and I think it would be fantastic, because I think it would be great from the resident standpoint to see a flood mitigation project get completed. But you have broken down your watershed analyses, and I think that's great, because it showed the Board of Commissioners, when Heather went through it, where you're going. You're going to study the township. And that's a great thing. Maybe one of these other project slides and I'm not saying which one, but does Midland go 17, 18, or does whatever Banbury? I don't know. There's ways you can do it, and I'm only here to recommend to this board. So however this board wishes to do it, we should move forward in that fashion. We just have to do it tonight.
So Regina,
Well, I
how
think
would
Midland
you, go ahead.
Avenue is off, because we have no concept there yet. We haven't
Yeah.
even picked our third concept, so that title has to be removed. It can come back, but right now, we're not ready for that one. I think we're ready for the Banbury Francis, and we're close to ready for the one we were looking at tonight, wouldn't you say?
Well, the only thing is, I think we need to wait and see what cost Dan's going to have for that. I guess realistically,
So that's why I'm saying, why would we have Midland Avenue on there when we don't have,
yeah, I think
it doesn't make any sense. We're putting them out of, place there.
I mean, Dan, realistically, you're probably going to come back with numbers, a low of 600,000, a high of 1.2 million. So realistically, if
Oh, I think it could go much higher. What do
or
you
even
think, Dan?
higher, but-
I think the construction for that's going to be nowhere under a million.
But just taking a step back, if we were to pick one project a year, and let's say that project is, I'm just picking a number, $800,000, and I'm sure that one's going to be more. Really, you're not left with a lot for sewer cleaning and culvert and everything else. So I think what we need to do is realistically, I think you're going to either pick Banbury Way or you're going to pick that parking lot at Runnymede. It's going to be one or the other. I think the connection to at least for the 2016, 2017, and then to be fair to the rest of the township, although there are other projects in Ithan Creek, I think you're going to have to pick, whatever Dan's analysis yields, you're going to have to pick projects. And I think that's not, the earliest that's going to occur is 2018, 2019. So I think,
Well, I think you're on the right track, but I want to take a step back when you say to be fair to the rest of the township. If you're solving flooding in the center of town in front of our fire station, you're being fair to everyone in this township. You know what I mean?
totally agree.
That's a little,
Right.
I don't want anyone to get the idea that if it's not in their neighborhood, it's not meaningful.
I just want to make sure that down the road, I think we need to start a project. We started with Ithan Creek. We need to put forth a project. We've got the ball rolling. Let's either do the Banbury Way or this year, and then possibly, although I don't know if there's even going to be money for the parking lot. I think it's really going to be one or the
I think
other.
we could
Right.
leave it open, is what I'm trying to say. Don't pin ourselves down, leave it open. We have certain things that are already, we already know. And now with this new information tonight, that severely cuts back the amount of money we have to do other things, as you're noting. So we need to be realistic about how soon, we may not get to them for years.
Yeah.
However, that's just the way it is. And if we can get grant funding or partner funding, then those would get advanced.
So could we label it as Ithan Creek capital projects and just put a number?
We could do that, or we could just say flood control projects,
But
because those are both flood control.
is
but
that, I'm
however-
trying to make a distinction between repair and some alteration of the system that is different than it is right now.
I don't think you're making the clear distinction that you really want to make, which is it maintenance or is it correction of a flood problem?
Yeah,
Is
I'm
that
good
what
with
you're
that.
trying to
I'm
go
good with that.
between those two?
Yeah, thank you for
'Cause I don't
putting
wanna
that language.
I want to make it plain as day to anyone who's looking at this. We're repairing or we're mitigating flooding.
So I would like a column in this budget that has those two
Repair and mitigation.
mitigation.
Mitigation could also mean for erosion and things like that as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be a flooding. If
Just so that
pick a
then we can
term-
add them up and say,
Pick a
this
term
is how
that makes
much.
sense, that could encompass any safety, flooding, erosion, those types of problems.
Right.
We're addressing problems
Right.
rather than repairing
Right.
existing, like filling this pipe. That would be a repair
Right.
to a degree,
So now just to make sure I'm clear, the middle school project is still on 2016?
I think that one, yeah,
I think
because it's
that's a
so,
no-brainer, yes.
it's so straightforward.
Yeah.
Yes, that needs to stay.
And it's within reach, I think that's good. And I don't think that the North Wayne Basin should be spelled out individually either, because that should just go in that lump, because maybe that's going to be delayed, we don't know.
Is that a
timing-wise.
repair or is that an upgrade?
It could be
It
either.
could be either,
I know.
because they could
That's
propose
the
measures or
thing.
just repair
So
what's
how do we get
existing.
around that one? I mean,
don't even wanna go
honestly.
there.
it
Maybe we
could be-
leave that one separate.
It could be either or both.
And I think it's going to be both. I mean, if they have the opportunity, why would you?
As
did
as
upgrade
proposed
the
currently, it's
capacity.
not a repair, but it
Yeah.
could change to a repair.
Right.
We don't know. So I think we just have to be careful not to be too specific.
I'm good with that.
So the bar.
Why don't we highlight the ones that we're keeping? And that would be an easy way to start.
In 2016,
Yes.
okay.
So Steve, let me just ask one thing. The stormwater locating, televising, cleaning, that is something that falls under here. There's no other. Source of funds? Yes,
You mean in the general fund?
yes.
No. There
Okay,
isn't.
so then that has to stay. So that
Pardon me?
has to stay then.
Is there anything on this list that could fall under other funding sources within the township?
Other than grants, but everything on here,
This is
Is-
where it's coming
is-
from.
is-
That's just
was-
good to know.
yeah, is from the fund. There's one of the things, I believe we budgeted money this year, so our televising cleaning is actually not going to start till January or February, because
Good, we just
bidding.
found $50,000.
That's for Dan's sake when he's doing that. And as the chair said, we could easily defer a year or two of culvert studies to pay for the
Well,
design on the dam.
Again,
right?
they're repairs, right?
Actually, that's a different issue. That's inspection. So I'm a little bit hesitant to quickly erase that, because having the data that we need to make decisions is important to keep up front. I think safety concerns obviously are priorities. However, having the information to make the smart decisions on where you fund things, I think we could uncover something that potentially is more like this mill dam situation.
So
you know?
those two are to stay. That's what I
I
think
would
hear you
recommend
saying.
keeping
think they
those.
need to
And
stay.
even if we do videotape in January, that doesn't mean we can't videotape again in June or July.
No, absolutely.
Right.
Okay,
All right, so the first two stay. So the 50,000 stays, the 400,000 stays.
and the various culvert study stays,
And that is where,
down, halfway down.
so that's 45,000. And then the Water Creek analysis, they stay.
I had a question about that. What was the cost for the Ithan Creek watershed analysis?
60,000?
Okay, so if we were to put all of those together as one watershed study, I'm not going to use the word study, correct myself, analysis. I think we're up against some challenges. Some people feel that we need more detailed models. I think that's something we need to address briefly just because of the budgeting impacts of that. I wouldn't quickly jump to increase those numbers to say that we're going to do this dynamic model of the entire township and every inch of it. But I think in all fairness, we have to respond to that concern. So can we take a minute to just,
Absolutely.
I think what we've done so far works for me. I think the high-level analysis to identify the flood concerns in a system, and then the in one watershed or all watersheds can work very well if you go back when you go to do your design work and assess the value of the work. I don't necessarily think our township has systematic flooding so much as localized flooding. So what's happening in Ithan Creek, it does trickle down, but it's all part of the same, short section of Ithan Creek. But most of these flood concerns that I'm seeing are pretty localized. Do you feel like that's fair at least from Ithan Creek, So if you were to model the concept you showed us tonight locally, not in a system per se, in this case, you are talking about pipes that connect from Banbury to there. It might be worthwhile to model those two together. But to model those two along with something that's outside the Ithan Creek makes no sense whatsoever, as far as resources go, to get that detailed.
Well, I'd question whether you even had the amount of detail you need between Banbury and the middle school area. The effort to gather all the information seems like it's cost prohibitive. And
if we can get the roadway plans, that could happen. That's the way I'm looking at it, because it's all in the PennDOT roadway from there.
But wouldn't this happen for the design firm who would come in and would survey it and would look at the watershed, take the watershed analysis that Dan's done and take that information and provide a survey? Are we paying for it almost twice by doing it up front for the board so that they have a level of comfort to move forward, and then whoever would be awarded this design would have to do it again? That's the one
I
thing
think that survey would
avoid.
carry forward. I don't think if you surveyed it to do the study, that would be used in the design, wouldn't you think so? I mean, at least for pipe systems, because they're not changing. But like the survey we have on that one swale, probably is all changed. It's useless at this point.
And I had put that in one of my emails. That's all that.
It's just an indicator. It can't be used for design purposes.
There's an issue there. It's been 13 years. Those contours no longer exist, in that fashion. But I think you bring up a real good point, because Dan and I just had this discussion. We don't physically have the data he needs to do detailed studies. So we were either going to pay him to get that data as part of his study, or we're actually working with his firm, and I hate to say this, I'll be coming forth to you at one point with another proposal for them, and I don't know, it may never come to fruition because it's going to be costly, but to take our plans, to digitize our plans, to take our laser fiche and try to get an accurate map with pipe sizes and some modicum of accuracy as to where these things are for Dan to use. So you can pay Dan to do it as part of his analysis, and then the township owns that, and that goes on our GIS, and we're all happy. You can pay the next engineer who does the detailed design, as Heather said, to do that. So you folks have options in how detailed these studies go, but there is a limit to how detailed they will be, because there's only so much information we can give him.
I want to make sure I understand something here. So storm sewer locating, which is the 50K up front, is not this?
It is. I'm sorry, Paul. It is part of this. So that project is televising the pipes, locating the pipes, which is Regina's part, which was fantastic. That's going to go back on our GIS system. But it's also another asset management tool, because we're going to run these pipes. So yes, we're locating them. Yes, we're cleaning them. But now we're also ascertaining their condition. So this will be another bucket for this group to say, for this commission to say, hey, Steve, we see you've reviewed all the files, and you're saying that somewhere along the line we need to replace 2,000 feet of storm sewer on X road. But it is that, Paul, but it's not all encompassing. I know $50,000 sounds like a lot.
No, I'm just trying to understand this requirement of mapping the pipes in the township. Doesn't part of that get accomplished by doing the work for 50K?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I was really asking.
I guess my only hesitation with Don Curley's comments were, are we spending, again, more money and more money on studies? I think we have to find a middle ground to a point where we can say, yes, there's so much money that we're allocating for studies. Is that adequate to move forward with the project, to go to a request for a proposal? Or are we going to spend how much more to do something like this? $60,000? But, I mean, are we just spending more and more money? I hate to not have money available to do projects when I feel like we have a level of comfort from what Dan's given us to go to the board.
So I'll speak as a non-engineer, and we already talked about this before. So I can see where Don is coming from. He's asking a question that, how do you show the public that what we're going to do is going to be something of use? And so when he said that, well, how much will Banbury Way's puddling be reduced, by doing this? So could you model that? You've got enough information to do that, it seems to me. And then there was this general discussion about, okay, could we do that for the rest of the township? And I think what I heard, so there is a drive or a need to know what's going on enough that we're saying, yes, this makes sense. But my comment back to the Board of Commissioners would be, but if the engineers are all saying this is not worth the money, then I'd have to defer to their expertise, because I don't know. I mean, I would like to see it. I argued that last meeting. But if it doesn't make sense, then I would have to say, okay. So we really have to rely on you guys to tell us what makes sense.
I mean, is there kind of a hybrid? Is there something so that, we could provide additional data to Don just to answer his questions? Because his points are very well taken. It's really just a matter of funding. I mean, if we could do, like Don said, for everything, I mean, that would be invaluable information, but...
Well, it's not just funding, it's also time.
It's time, it's funding, and I just want to make sure that we are putting an equal amount aside for projects, for infrastructure, for permitting, for cleaning. So I guess the question is, what could we do to try and provide additional information back to the board that wouldn't break the bank, but might give the commissioners a next level of comfort that this is a noteworthy project to do?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. And obviously, you can spend $1 million on a model. You can spend $60,000 on a model, and you get literally what you pay for. I mean, not to sound crass, but I guess I was hearing the other night from Commissioner Curley and others the need to do a more comprehensive model that would allow the benefits of a project, in the upstream section of a watershed. What are the benefits downstream in a much more comprehensive, quantitative way? And again, you can certainly model that.
What does something like that cost? Ballpark. I mean, I'm not holding you to it, just to get a rough idea.
Well, anywhere from, say, 200 to 300,000, if not more, I would say. And there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of assumptions, as Steve has mentioned. There's unknown data that would have to be collected. Now, some of that exists in various forms, as-built plans, microfiche, all that kind of stuff that's available. There's a bit of work that would be going into getting all that and digitizing all that and making sense of it, putting it into the system. And then there's what we could know, and then what we don't know, which would have to be gathered. And maybe we don't get every storm sewer. Maybe we get the main storm sewers. Maybe every pipe above a certain size would have to be mapped, surveyed. But maybe the smaller storm sewers, maybe we don't need to get to that level of detail.
So let me ask you this, Steve. Is this something that's been protocol for any other projects? This type of in-depth? I want to see if we can provide Don Curley with information, because I understand what he's saying, but at the same point in time, are we willing to spend $200,000 to provide an additional level of comfort, for that? It just seems like a lot of money for projects. Like, I'd hate to not be able to do a project like Banbury Way because we spent $300,000 gathering information and survey, and now there's not enough money to build it.
You bring up a great point. I think it was the flavor of the board. I don't recall if they actually had a motion on it, but I believe the consensus was in agreement with Commissioner Curley. But that was very specific to Banbury Way. If I'm correct, it was very specific to one project, because you're in somewhat of a conundrum, as you said. As detailed as the study gets, and we're spending a lot of money on surveying and mapping pipes that are there to run through the model, but really have there's no flooding or other issues in that area. So from my standpoint, boy, it's going to be wonderful that we can load up on the GIS system and have maps with valid inverts and pipe types and inlet sizes. That's a great thing. But in vast expanses where we're just conveying stormwater, it's good for his stormwater model, but you're spending money in an area where there probably is no issue. So my suggestion would be, you take it from, and for lack of a better term, a somewhat general study that Dan is doing, and then if you so wish, when he comes up with those hot spots that just blew up on the screen, focus your survey specific on those areas, because, well, we know there's a problem at whatever area it is. So this commission could say, okay, Dan, you've completed the Meadowbrook Run watershed analysis, and there's 2 areas that light up the screen on your map. On those areas, we want to see that same analysis you're doing on Banbury on those 2 areas. And then maybe you pay him to do the detailed survey, which will carry forth to the next engineering firm that does the design.
Let me ask you this, with the modeling program that you have, I know it's very specific, like to your company and how you model it, and I know you know the ins and outs of it. Is it something that even graphically, let's say we pick the 10-year storm for Banbury Way, and we just guesstimate what the size area of the bed would be. Is there any way to produce some sort of document or picture that we could show to the board and say, here, the flood reduction was all this green and yellow, which was so many feet. Now it's down to approximately this. Is that an easy, probably never easy, but it's something that we could at least provide back to Don? Is there a next level that wouldn't cost $200,000?
There is.
Okay.
There is. There is a way to do that, and it's not a significant effort to do that. It's definitely not $200,000.
Because I think if maybe you could just think about what that would be and say, okay, maybe for, $10,000 or whatever, just to, I think it's something that we could maybe, if it's not super costly, could provide additional data, but not waste $200,000 on more studies.
So I make sure I understand, this is for Banbury or this is for?
This is just for Banbury.
Right. And you had said, I thought I heard at the meeting, you said you've got enough information to do a model. I didn't understand how much that was going to be. I guess that was the thing I didn't get.
For Banbury?
Yeah.
Well, so we did a model. We used EPA SWIM, and that's, and not to get too into the weeds on the modeling, but it's generally a 1D model. It's pipe flow, predominantly. So what our model was more of the surface flooding, more of a 2D model. And there's ways to combine those two to get the SWIM and our flood modeler program, the 1D and the 2D, to work together. So you're looking at the pipe flow, and then when the pipe flow is insufficient to convey that runoff, it's going to surcharge, and now our 2D model kicks in, and it can define where that flood goes, that flooded area. But so we had enough information for Banbury to do a more detailed model and to run different scenarios, storage scenarios, and to determine what we needed to reduce the flooding for different storm events.
So you have what was requested of the board, by the board for Banbury. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, what was
a higher level
requested from the board, I think, was a more visual indication of the spread of the flood, if you will, given the different options. Again, definitely something that can be done.
I have crayons if you need them.
Well, and the other thing too, and I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of like your contract and things. I know we had money that for advising us, and I don't know if we've used that or not, but to me that seems like an appropriate thing that we had that one line item that if we did need input on a stormwater project, to me this seems like would be the perfect time for year 2015 to do that. So maybe it's something, because I want to wrap up this because Paul worked really hard on the ODPs and I want to get into that tonight. Maybe you and Steve and I can coordinate this week and put that in motion and come up with a game plan to provide something back for Don without blowing the budget and giving him yet a comfort level and the rest of the board a comfort level to move forward. How's that sound?
That's good for me.
Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
Okay.
And the only other comment I would make, more of a question, I guess. So right now in the
Yeah,
budget.
budget. I was going to ask, what about the
Well,
budget?
so, yeah, and related to the budget, so there's the Darby Creek watershed analysis, Meadowbrook Run, and Gulf Creek. And, based on the discussion at the board meeting the other night, I was almost wondering, do those three costs really get rolled up into one cost that's more of a comprehensive study? Can we try to marry a 1D model with a 2D model that's focused, and we would have to, the scope would have to be crafted around that budget, but I think we can do a lot for that.
I think if it would save on time and funding and money, I absolutely think we should do that at one shot. If we have it in the same year anyway, if it's going to move things along faster and it's going to be more economically feasible, I think we should do it.
So are we, okay, I'm for that as well. Are we dropping any, or moving anything from 2016 to 2017?
The only thing that I think we should look at doing is like the Wayne train station design enhancement. I think that's something that maybe we could get the ball rolling on the mill dam and maybe switch funding there.
Yeah, but that's
I know it's
really
only
a small amount of money.
I know it's only a small amount, but, well, we'll have to add something else to that. So let's do this. So we've got almost 300,000, 280 for the watershed analysis. I mean, is it something that we could say where for, $200,000, we could do all three, or is that just too low of a cost? Maybe 250,000 to do all three? And I don't want to, give you an exact, you don't have to give me an exact answer. I know we're putting you on the spot, but.
There is, I just want to make sure this is clear. There's nothing on the repair side that can be shifted into 2017.
Well, there is. I mean, we could push the mill dam, but again, that's an emergency type of.
Well, yeah, let's find out about the
Project.
pipe filling.
Right.
Okay.
So do we want to at least combine the watershed analysis? I mean, let's just do that. Let's just do remaining township-wide watershed analysis. And then just put a cost, I don't know, like 275. Let's just pick a number. How does that sound? 275.
Is the 2.5 million, do we have 2.5 million at this point?
I thought we did because we didn't spend quite everything. There was leftover from the previous year.
Yeah, I thought
I'll
about the
defer to
numbers.
Dan, but that was his, part of his analysis of our funding, that in 2016, this commission would be able to recommend $2.497 million worth of work, whatever that work may be.
Steve, let me ask you, out of the Mill Road culvert versus the Mill Dam, which one is more of a priority if we had to pick?
To be Solomon. So the Mill Road Dam is of concern to me, of great concern. But the Mill Road culvert is a failing pipe, and now, granted, it's not a dam, and it's not going to flood people, but that road's been subsiding and subsiding and subsiding. We inspected the pipe. The pipe's literally coming apart at the seams, and we're in the design. I would love to see that project, move forward. And I know we struggle with infrastructure versus the flooding and, the permitting, but.
I mean, is that something that we could push the 160 to 2017? And then we were at about 245 for the Mill Dam, so there would be 160 available for year 2016? And in addition, Steve, when you were out, we just lumped the three watershed analysis together. Dan thought it would be done in a more timely fashion, economic, and we're just going to, it's
I did hear
ballpark.
that. I think that's great.
So, and we'll just combine, instead of like 280, maybe we'll just like 275.
My recommendation to the commission is, again, my recommendation is to keep the Mill Road culvert in. I don't know if that's going to fail this year. I can't tell you definitively.
Could we
yes,
push?
it's going to fail.
Could we push mail-in? We have to push something. We have to push something. We have to push something. So out
give
of,
us a priority, Steve.
Okay.
Give us a priority.
we have to push something.
So what I would tell you on Malin Road culvert is, why don't we design in 16 and construct in 17? So that'll slide a considerable amount of money over.
So could we split it, 200,000, 2016?
I don't even think you need 200. I think it could be, 100, 300.
Let's do that, because then that would have money for the mill dam. So if we do 100 for mail-in and push 300 to 2017, now I'll have to shift things there, but we could put in the mill dam for 250 in 2016. I mean, if these poor people have emergency, call system to get out of your house, that to me is just.
The report didn't say it was, failure was imminent, but I think we're prudent in moving along as quickly as we can.
I agree.
I just want to make sure, I just had a discussion with Dan, we don't have 2.5 million to spend. Or am I missing something, Dan?
I thought,
Well, it looks like the stormwater administrator costs might not be on this version. Is that right?
I don't know, we gave you everything we had. No, but those costs come out of here also, absolutely.
So I think what Paul is saying is that the 2015 balance in this version was 1.8 million.
Dan, you bring up a good point. We need to include your year 2 costs, which were, I think, 70-some thousand.
Right. It's in the spreadsheet.
But I'm not. Am I seeing it here?
It's not in this version, I think.
well, I think one thing right off the bat is the Wayne train station. I mean, I think it's great to try and partner up, but when I see projects like this that are screaming for attention, that 30,000 has to go somewhere else.
I think I concur.
I mean, I'd love to partner up, but I'm not saying it's a dead issue, but I think if we're going to do the worst flooding and the most severe infrastructure projects, the Wayne train station, A Perfect World, would be fantastic to do, but I think the
So you just want to
30,000.
move it out a year?
Or move it to something else.
You have to do something with the 250 you just added.
Right. So I'm saying just put 0.
You
So-
would move it out, like to the,
Push these back.
So
4
that-
years
you've
from now?
got-
Well, no, what I'm saying is that it would start in 2017.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Just
Yeah.
shift it over one.
Shift it, right.
Both of them over one, just copy and paste. I guess you can't do that.
So the design would be in 2017?
Right.
Design
Yes.
and construction, or just design?
Design,
I think just the design and then the construction would be out one more year.
right.
Because who knows if it's ever going to happen? I mean,
For my own edification, so we're talking about the Wayne train station
Delete the
design
30K.
enhancement.
right, because that was something we were going to partner with.
Right, so we had $100,000 from PICO, right? So that's
SEPTA,
the,
I thought it was SEPTA.
that's
SEPTA.
the, pardon me?
SEPTA? Or
I'm
PICO?
sorry, yes, SEPTA, my apologies. Yes, we had $100,000 from SEPTA, and the township, as part of that, agreed to kick in the design cost. Now, that design is underway, right? We've already spent money on it.
So that 30,000 has to stay, is that what you're saying?
Yes, I do. We're, unless you want me to truncate,
Well, I guess the question is, how far along are we with it?
I had to check the bills to see, we're probably halfway.
Oh,
Remember I was telling you folks in the email, we haven't been able to do our infiltration testing yet? But we have a preliminary design on that.
well, if we've got a preliminary design on that, I hate to just cut it, because then you just wasted money.
agree.
So I think now it's got to stay in. Ay, ay, ay.
Then to make it be built in 18, that's this,
Yeah.
at this
The
board's budget.
100,000 that's not a match. I mean, that's
No, that was SEPTA money that was given
SEPTA
to
money.
us.
So that's actually added in as revenue. But the 30,000 then, is that expected to be spent this year then? I mean,
Get on that property, Dan, yes. I think we will
Okay.
spend it all,
Okay.
if we can.
So
Well,
Dan, can you just tell us how much we're over by, according to your estimation, so we know we have to cut something?
About 250, because that's what we added.
Well, so right now, this is showing for 2016, there's a balance. We have 250, there's 250 left
How can
in
that
the
be?
budget. But then, as we go out, we end up, below 250,000.
Oh, we can do, so we're okay, you're saying, for 2016?
Correct.
So, okay, all right.
So the additional, it says Creek additional projects, 50,000. Do we just, I think, just lump that into, I think we just need to put it, like Regina said, just like Ithan Creek capital, whatever you want to call it, capital projects, and leave it at that, because we really don't know what we're going to, if we're going forward with Banbury or the parking lot. So we can see a total, at least, of what we have for the Ithan Creek projects, or sites, or whatever you want to call.
Yeah, I think that's fine, which brings me to the point, if at all possible, if one or more members of the committee could come to Monday night's budget meeting, because there may be questions of this. And I can answer many of them, but I can't answer for your thought on how to get there.
Because who knows, like, let's say we can't provide enough information to the board that they don't want to go forward with Banbury, but we can because we have additional survey information for the Runnymede. I'd rather not say which specific project, but this is just what.
So that was what Regina was suggesting earlier. I'm fine with that.
Well, what did we decide to do about the North Wayne Basin? Did we want to call that a more general term in case that doesn't happen that year? It can be spent on something else and then shifted? Like something like line 58. We have 100,000 for Ithan Creek flood reduction project. How about just change that flood reduction project? Take out the Ithan Creek, take out the Midland, combine those two figures, and you get the same result if nothing changes. If things change, then you swap out whatever it is that you're going to do. So take away the Ithan Creek, keep the flood reduction project, take away the Midland Avenue, and put all the money together.
Yeah, put it in one Ithan Creek flood reduction.
No, not even Ithan Creek. It just can be flood reduction. You're not pinning yourself down that way.
Including Banbury and Francis, or just?
I think Banbury and Francis were kind of further along in that regard, don't you?
I would just request.
Don't you think?
I mean,
we could, but then underneath we could put parentheses,
The board-
such as.
Yeah, because the board did ask for a certain level of specificity that came from Dan's study. They'd asked for.
Yeah, I think if we give it a general term, but say possibly including or such as, and then you list all of them, and that way you don't have to pin down which one's going to happen, but they know that they get a feeling for what we're going for without having to, tie ourselves down.
I absolutely agree.
Does that? I think it's a little hard. I'm sorry, the way we're working it, but
No, I think-
we're
No,
I
kind
think
of
we have to-
in
We have
an
to.
odd situation to have to
Yeah.
make these decisions with the the information still trickling in.
Oh, and North Wayne, okay, so North Wayne Basin, that's Gulf Creek, right? That's Gulf Creek.
Flood reduction projects. And that would entail, or that would also include the North Wayne Basin.
Because of
And
things
this
beyond our
miscellaneous.
control, the timing may not be such that it can happen in certain years.
And that would also include this.
Yeah, and that way we can be a little more fluid with our, to balance our budget there. We can just change the general number, so we don't have to start picking one thing out or another.
And, just a suggestion, I don't think there's any harm or foul in keeping a contingency because, you don't know when I'm
Oh,
going to be
yeah,
coming
having
to
a
you.
positive balance, I have no
Yeah,
issue with.
when I'll be coming
It's
to
the
you again.
negative ones I'm a little alarmed
And I
by.
say, oh, by the way, this failed, today.
But honestly, looking at everything we're looking at tonight, it's pretty clear to me that our stormwater budget may not be sufficient for the needs of the township. So grant money is really going to play a big role.
I think we all knew this was coming. We just had to see it in black and white.
But I don't even think for a wish list. I think for a must list, we need to look at grants and partnerships just to keep pace.
So we changed that to flood reduction projects, but then below it says flood reduction projects, Darby, Gulf, Meadowbrook.
You're right.
Asking Dan just to consolidate. You don't have to do it right now, but just consolidate.
I don't think you have to specify the watersheds. I think you should call out some of the ones we know about. You could say North Wayne, you could say, whichever, Banbury.
But do we
and-
need to combine line 61 and line 58?
Yeah, I think,
D1.
Just put it all under flood reduction. Just put it all under flood reduction. And it doesn't matter what watershed it's in.
Right, you
It's
don't
gonna
have
be
to
flood
specify the
reduction.
watershed. You
Right.
just have to give samples of what we're talking about.
Because we might decide that there's 2 that we want to do in Ithan Creek and maybe not an immediate need in, I don't know, Darby Creek, but then there is an immediate need in Gulf Creek, and then we're not backing ourselves into a quarter if we do 2 in one watershed and 1 in another.
And the other thing is not just flexibility based on need, but like about timing. Some things take longer than others.
Can we scroll down to the bottom and see where we're going to get the extra 250,000?
Well, the
from?
other thing is that the Banbury Francis project at 500,000, that's at the low end, so.
I thought we were combining that one too, even though, are we? What did we
Well, Steve
decide?
was
I'm
just
losing
saying,
my mind.
I think that the board
That
had,
one's further advanced, so we want to keep it separate, but then we have to up the
Right.
cost, double it basically, because we're talking about engineering and construction, right?
Can't we put it across years?
A project like that, I could see getting done in 1 year, but if we don't have the money, then obviously we can't.
Well, I'm just going to double it for now.
And then,
Got to get rid of, we've
We
got to
need to
find
remove-
211,000.
More than that.
Weren't we going to push one of the, I thought we were going to push one of the projects, the Malin Road. Did we change that? Oh, you did change that. We
That was
pushed.
changed.
It was
It's just
changed.
pushing it. We need to get
Right.
rid of something.
What we need to do is get rid of either Mill Dam or Mill Road. It's got to be one or the other because they're both 200.
can you refresh my memory on the Mill Road?
It's a failing culvert.
And that was something that was pretty
It's
far
in bad
along.
shape,
I
yes.
don't know that that can be delayed.
I can't-
Can any of these things be appropriations? Because we have an issue here if we have failing culverts and we don't address them, you know?
When you say appropriations.
Can they, you know, is there a fund balance this year or anything that the township can address one of these immediate needs with?
I mean, that could always be a request. I think the whole assumption of the Stormwater Fund was that it was going to take care of these. I don't know that anybody realized, and Paul brings this up pretty
How
regularly.
many problems there are?
How many problems we have found with our infrastructure.
Yeah,
That
it's a
would-
serious problem. So where are we with project money? We have project money only for flood.
Oh.
Yeah, I think we have to put Banbury in with the general flooding
Well,
reduction.
here's
thing
another
then.
savings, the stormwater fee billing. We had 50,000 a year, but that's,
That's going to go way down. I know you're still going to have some involvement in it, but I don't know. You'd have to tell us.
Down
if
to
you
what,
think
like 30?
that. I think like $5,000. No, I'm kidding. I can't speak for Dan.
Darn.
Well, maybe we should put like a 10 then.
But I
mean, that, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, but one of our folks has stepped up and said, I'll do it. But there's still, there's going to be Dan's group, there's always going to be updating. They're going to own the file from what I understand. You're going to update that and things like that.
Well, I believe some of that's in our scope already. I
Correct.
believe this 50,000 was for a vendor to come in and take over the billing, and that's not going to happen anymore.
Oh,
The
okay,
township's
so that
gonna be
was,
doing it,
that
so-
was an additional outside fee.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I believe
So
we're
that-
covered under our scope for that. for
Okay,
that task.
so does that go away, or
I
does
think
it?
it goes away.
I say it goes away.
Now, there's costs incurred by the township, obviously.
Yeah, I would think that you might want to keep $5,000 or $10,000 till we.
Let's keep
before we
10.
go through that.
Let's keep 10,
You're
just so
still
there's
going to gain
something.
40 a year?
10?
Let's keep 10.
So I want to ask a hard question. It is the case that we have a lot of repairs. And so should we be shifting the improvement projects backward in time to, say 2017? Because we don't have the money.
I think we have to further pursue some of that information and get a better idea, because for me, safety is one of my primary decision tools, because if it's a safety hazard, that just, has to come.
Yeah, so I am saying we have to do certain repairs. And if that's
Flooding
the
can also be a
case,
safety hazard in some instances, too.
I hear you, but, okay, where are we getting the money from?
So I don't know how we make that determination on the spot, like which goes to what. But I guess, just correct me if I'm wrong. We do this budget, next year, we do this budget again. We can make adjustments to it.
Yes, and
You're not supposed to completely throw it out. It should be somewhat reasonable, but we're going to have a
Right.
much better position next year when we do this.
I agree. But I think as the commission moves forward, at one point, your 5-year budget's going to be relatively stable.
Yeah, once
Yeah,
the
but-
studies are farther
Yeah,
along.
I mean, you're a fledgling committee with a first-time 5-year capital budget from that fund, ever.
Let me ask you a question from a realistic standpoint. You might not have an answer. What are the odds that we're going to need the funding for North Wayne Basin in 2016? God, I'm opening a can of worms, and
I really don't think we need to
I don't mean
go
to upset
down
the
that
apple
road.
cart.
I think what
I'm
we
just
should do
I'm
is
just thinking we're almost at 2016, and would even, let's just say they cleared everything that they needed to with the school district. Would they need that 732,000, have all the permitting and all the testing and all the design and all the approvals done in 2016? That, could we put it to 2017? It might not be an option.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought we were going to put that in with the general flood reduction
Well,
projects.
if we make Banbury specific
Yeah,
projects.
because that way, if
That's
it
what that
can't
is.
happen, it can't happen.
No, but, I mean, if we make the criteria that it's a specific project that we've discussed extensively, then certainly North Wayne fits under that criteria, so it should stay separate.
I don't know that any of them should stay separate, is what I'm trying to say. Why would we make our lives harder? At this moment, without enough information, why are we trying to make decisions that we can't possibly know the correct answers to?
You know what? I think we should lump it in. I think we should lump it in. It's a flood reduction project.
So are you taking Banbury, I mean,
No, we're not taking it away. We're just going to have
I
to make a
don't think
decision.
we need to say that
down the
money
road.
in that year goes to that project. Do you see what I'm saying? I think they could all be together with a list. You could have North Wayne, Banbury, this, that, the other thing, all listed in that category. And our intention may be this goes in this order, but it may not be feasible. So if you don't know, at this point, you don't know what you can construct.
But I just go back to the board's request that out of Dan's study came 3 requests for proposals to do specific projects.
well, and we have one
And-
that wasn't approved by the
Right.
board.
My request is
You can request more information on those,
request
and
is that-
I agree,
that
they
you
should
would-
think it through.
that you would list those 3 projects. And don't forget, the board gets, the commissioners get to review this, and it may come back to you.
But Steve, we don't have 3 projects.
Yeah, you do. I mean, you
So we have no money, we don't have any idea of the
We have
money?
one, and we have a baby
You-
one.
You have Banbury, you have the Runnymede, you have South Wayne, you have projects. You don't have to do them all in 1 year, but they were the hot spots that blew up on Dan's.
But Runnymede and South
presentation.
Wayne is one project, and it's not
Correct.
even fully conceived yet. So we can potentially list that on this list. However, we can't pick a year or anything like
So
that.
what's wrong with Regina's proposal to just put them as parentheses to flood control projects, so that we list
Yes.
them?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right,
Yeah,
great.
we're going to
Yes.
spell them
Yeah.
out. However, we're not going to say this one gets this year,
I
this
think
one
that's
gets
great.
that year.
That's just in deference to the Board of Commissioners to say, we listened to you, we have this, but you're not sure where it's going yet. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
So you're going to
Because
combine
that gives flexibility
53,
with- to
54,
respond to these emergency
and
conditions.
55. Can we combine those?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. All the flood
53,
reduction projects.
54, and 55 would be combined.
So you think we
Yeah,
would combine
I think-
middle school,
Yes.
Banbury?
The only one that was different was the middle school connection, because that I think it's already ready to go to.
That seems like somewhat low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, that one was the
I mean,
only
that's-
one that I
That's not
looked
a
at as a
complicated.
different.
I mean, that's a pipe design project. There's not BMPs involved with that. That's,
So straightforward. I thought that one, and we had a pretty good grip on the cost of that one, too. So right? I
Okay,
mean,
I'm okay with pulling that one out, but I
That's
think
the-
the rest should
that's
be
the
combined.
one.
Because you already talked to Gannett Fleming about this, correct? Like, it's already in motion.
We have a proposal from them. I mean, we just got it today. Dan and I discussed it. I have maybe one comment, and that'll go to the board on the following, not Monday, but the following meeting, to the Board of Commissioners.
I think we should pull it out since we're already at, if you're already at a proposal stage, I think we should pull that one out, but I think the rest could be combined and just put in parentheses like Regina said. Doesn't matter what watershed it is, these are the projects.
Yeah, because the things like the Mill Road culvert and the Mill Dam, we know they're just going to accelerate the problem.
It's taken us decades and decades and decades to get to this point, and it's, you're not going to solve every problem in 5 years.
I think it's bringing to light that, that one, it was a $1 million seed money that was added in by the township. That was very smart of them to do that and to understand that up front, we are going to have a lot of infrastructure and safety concerns that need to be addressed.
And just to clarify, Paul, to your question before, so the 2015 balance is 1.8, and then there's $1 million we're assuming coming in from revenue, so there's 2.8 million available to spend in 2016, approximately. Well,
A little bit.
in the following years.
We just need to adjust our larger figure, yeah.
And so right now, this 1.6 million for flood reduction projects, that assumes 900,000 for Banbury, which again may be low, and then that assumes I think 750,000 for North Wayne, and that's
Yeah,
it.
that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wish I could answer the chair's question.
Yeah, so if one of those projects doesn't move forward, something else will take its spot. And then in the next year, we're going to have to reduce that 665 because that's really the only non-fixed. Right, isn't that the only one that's really discretionary at this point?
Well,
By
what's,
putting it to 400,
but what about
see what happens.
the upgrade
Yeah, we want to put
52?
that down to 400 probably in that
For which?
year.
What about the number column or row 52, the 200,000, 200,000, 200,000? Is
I
that?
think, given our
We want to keep that.
past history, we want to keep
We're not-
Because we kind of moved
Okay.
it out because we already identified where those repairs are
Okay.
in that
And we
this year.
spent more than 200,000 this year.
So, yeah, and
Okay.
that maybe we need to think about increasing it, but I think
Well, then
for
we have
now,
to-
I would just adjust
We just have
line
to back into it.
54. Line 54, I would adjust.
Yeah, we just have to back into that.
So what year do we have to cut?
So in year 2017, I want to say, is that where we're taking out 250 to make the balance work?
Still. not
We're
quite
close,
there.
but not quite there.
And the SFR rebates, that's small.
Why don't we decrease the one in 2015? Because that could fix our
Yes.
problem, because we know we're not going to, is that 16 or, yeah, 15? Because we know we're not spending it.
We're not spending 10,000. It's almost the end of 2015. We've got 1 month left. If you
So put it down to,
put 1,000 down.
Scroll down.
We're getting there. Realistically,
Make the
we've got
rebates 5 and
7,000. Yeah, make
I
the
think
rebates less.
5 and
5 and
yeah,
maybe
next
7.
year.
You could just
Yep.
step it up,
Sorry, I lost my. Oh, yeah. 5?
Make that one 5.
5.
That's all right.
So given the kind of putting this in perspective with the projects that you,
No, I think you're okay. No, I think you're okay. If, put that back to 10 and then scroll down. Let's take a look.
Thing in 2017 that looks high. The Malin Road number, is that a pretty good number that we can count on?
I believe we got that from the report.
So that's pretty real? That's not it's a recent report, so it's
Yeah.
at today's costs? Okay.
2017 is going to be a light project year,
Okay, so then,
if at all.
well, not really, because we're doing the Malin Road and 200,000 $400,000 worth of stormwater infrastructure. So
New
that's,
projects, though, for new capital.
oh, yeah.
About 400,000, that's,
I mean, you folks have a huge task, so there's been 50 years of issues building, and you have a certain amount of money that you're trying to solve many, many problems. And Commissioner Schaefer said it, it took us a long time to get here. It's going to take a long time to get out.
Yeah.
You can't do everything, you're not going to fix everything in 5 years. I think everybody up there wants to, but it just doesn't work that way.
Regina, we should put something in for ODPs.
Money in for ODP?
Well, we didn't.
Oh, no, we didn't. That's fine. We didn't get there yet. We're nice. We're not going to be giving them out next year, likely, anyway, right?
Okay.
Or if we
And
do,
again, couldn't
like,
that be
I'm
a-
hoping we'll have some surplus somewhere else.
and could we lump that in as a capital type thing if we're proposing to work with something? Like that, a year that's a $400,000 where we're light, that might be
I think
the time to do it.
I think right now we're barely making the numbers work. So 2017, I don't see where we could cut anything, but it would be nice if we could.
Hey, Steve, I hate to tell you, those 3 projects that you came forward with tonight,
They can fall under repairs. So that's not necessarily a problem. For something like an emergency repair, do you have funding that's coming out of here for that? Do we have a emergency? What would that fall under if you just went out there to stabilize it?
Okay, that's probably something from operating, Regina, like if we're just.
Okay, so that's small enough that we don't have to.
I mean,
put
I
it-
have a purchase order in for, I think it's $15,000, that when we first looked at it, we thought might suffice, but now it may just become a stopgap measure. But if a true emergency came up, it's going to throw all your numbers off, because it's, like Shimoni Road Bridge.
So let me ask this, are we happy with this? Because Paul's put together a lot of work that I think, if you guys don't mind hanging for a little bit, I would like to, he says 10 minutes. I'll even give you 14 minutes. How about that?
Okay.
I mean, are we okay with this? I don't want to rush it, but I also want to give him a chance to talk.
I want to thank you folks for doing this, so.
Do we need
it can go
to
the
do
board.
any kind of motion on this? Or is it is what it is?
I think you should for the minutes,
Okay,
that you folks voted on it, and
okay. I'd like to raise a motion to recommend the budget as shown in Dan's current file.
Third. All in favor?
Aye.
Good. All right, Paul, you are on.
Dan.
No.
Okay. Oh, you're copying that onto yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
All yours.
Thanks. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, well. Okay. So I'm just going to present this information so that it's out there and you have it in your heads at least a little bit more than it is right now. So we're talking about, I just want to point out to the public, other developed property is ODP, because who knew that? So Dan sent a memo today to those of us on the subcommittee, which he pretty much described why we want to do this. So give the owners a mechanism to reduce stormwater fee while we get to pursue our goals. And with the majority of the township in private ownership, it makes sense for us to try to do something like this. And Dan was proposing a grant program, and I'm going to talk about that, as well as a program that the folks who were on the ODP program before had come up with last year. So possibilities, one is to do nothing, don't have an ODP program or a grant program, maybe because of expense or complexity. One is credits, which is an ongoing fee reduction. One is grant, where you reduce the fee in the year, say, of construction, and that's all. And then there's a combined grants credit program, which is done in Lancaster. I'll talk about that. And then one is what we're calling targeted credits program, where you just aim at certain people who we would like them to help us with a particular stormwater project. So issues to consider. One is, what are you going to do with the fee? You're going to reduce it none, as in don't have a project, don't have an ODP project credit program at all, partially or full reduction. So none, I think we would say, if we're going to have any program, obviously we're going to reduce the fees by some amount. Dan made the argument that, and we've made this argument ourselves, that if you're a part of this township, you should pay some sort of the fee. Even if you're managing 100% of your runoff, you're still using the right-of-ways, and so you would have to pay something. And so the elimination of fee completely wouldn't be equitable or responsible. And so we argue, okay, so no full. So that means partial reductions. Another point to consider is inspection and enforcement, that, how often do you do this? We're proposing every 2 years, as you'll see in a little bit, but there is a cost associated with that. And so again, we have to weigh cost against how much we're going to get from this. Just to give you a sense of the possible incentives, these are the number of properties for ODPs and what they pay. So there's 2,002 that pay less than $1,000. Many of them, I think, are condos, fee owners, and they pay me like $10 or $20 a year. There's 82 who are between 1 and 5,000, 12 that are between 5 and 10,000, 7 that are between 10 and 20,000, and 2 that are greater than 20,000, including one at 66,000 or something like that. So it's a fair bit of money at the top end, but we're not talking a lot of properties. So that's something to consider as well as we go forward. And that was as of August of last year. I didn't have a chance to update those numbers. So the credit program, this is something when Maya was still on the board, Maya, Joe, Charles, and myself worked on. We used 14 programs in the rest of the United States that we found and came up with the following proposals. There's 3 things: credits granted, what would be what we'd give credits for, the application process, and then maintenance requirements. And these are the components that we thought of. So the credit types, we said really only volume credit, so no retention credits. And we said up to 100% credit in the construction year, so that's kind of like a grant. And then up to 50% thereafter. And in the second year, it'd be some percentage of the impervious area treated times 50%. So that's our calculation in a rough kind of way. We said we thought there should be an existing credit existing structure credit. So if you have a structure that was built to meet code, then that wouldn't apply. But otherwise, we'd give you 10% credit for maintaining that system, basically. And condos, we wanted to acknowledge there, and so up to 10%. But again, the amount of money that was involved is a very small amount. What would be the application process? Well, first of all, you'd have to have an ODP property in order to be eligible. We want to make it very simple. It'll be a one-page application. There's lots of one-page applications out there in the rest of the U.S., requiring a professional engineer verification. How would we time this? So they'd have to be submitted before the start of construction. We'd set a certain date so they could be batch processed. We'd respond within a certain number of days of application, again determined by Public Works, and then we prorate the credit to the date of filing. If a credit is denied, they can address the deficiencies and resubmit the application once, but the second review is final for that particular calendar year. No further appeal, okay? And we make it a 2-year credit program, there was like 1 to 5 years is what different places went, and we thought 2 years was a good amount. Renewal process would be engineer certification that the system is working, and that'd be submitted to the township. Maintenance, obviously really important. So proof of maintenance submitted to the township annually. We said it could be transferable if the property is sold. We wanted to give some credit for maintenance, again, just to help people realize that it has to be maintained and give them some reason for doing so. And then the township has a right to inspect at any time. And if they don't maintain records or the facility, they lose the credit and they wouldn't be able to apply for future maintenance because they're just not doing what they said they'd do. So that's that particular program. Clearly, cost is an issue. It's more complex than the SFR by a lot. I'm not sure if there are other questions. I'm, again, putting it out here right now just so we all see it. But, so obviously there's other stuff we could think about. Another one that, and again, this is what Dan was saying in his letter, was talking about, so that we have grants available to all properties on a first-come, first-served basis until we spend whatever budget we declare to be. So for instance, we may pay some portion of the first-time capital costs for a retrofit that, again, is outside of what's required by code. And then we would also take the extra step to reach out to targeted properties, properties that we think would help us with a particular project, to encourage them to apply. This is done in Lancaster. We're not sure Philly, Dan was saying, but in Washington, D.C. And then they could be used, we'd set up a policy about how they'd be used. So it might be we pay for design and or some portion of construction and or maintenance. It's, again, our choice about how to do that. Different municipalities have different ways of doing that. And again, Dan was saying one thing you could do, and is done, Dan, you might want to explain.
Sure. In Lancaster, PA, we help them get a low-interest loan through the Penvest program, and we put out a unit-priced based contract. So a contractor was selected to install some number of unspecified green infrastructure projects throughout the city before they were even designed, just based on, again, standardized details and specifications so that they can come up with unit prices. But the advantage of this is then the private owner gets the benefit of lower costs, because now it's part of a much bigger contract, so that they get a benefit from that perspective.
Thanks, Dan. So here are some of the examples. So Lancaster, they all have this grant application process, what technical requirements are for that to apply. Are there targeted properties for grants? Lancaster does this, and then up in Syracuse they do that, Philly doesn't. And then the interesting one in Syracuse is that they have a target based on location, and they use modeling to refine where they want to look. So where are they targeting, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier. Here's the credit. If there is a credit, so this is kind of a hybrid program. They become responsibility for maintaining it for some period of time, so 40 years, 45 years, 10 years. And then who's responsible for design and construction? In Lancaster, city covers 100% of the design, 90% of the construction, and here it's handled by the owner. So that's how other people handle this sort of thing. There was some discussion about targeted credits where you approach individual property owners that could directly impact a specific projects and reduce or eliminate fees or give them a grant based upon some changes to their properties. And in turn, they agree to maintain the system. There may be some legal issues with this. That, again, this is hot off the press today, talking with Dan, and so we need to explore that some more. So those are the three types. That's what we have, and I don't know what, we lost our chair. If there are any comments or questions in the remaining 3 minutes that we have.
Well, I think I like the idea of the targeted, and I think we have to realize that we're very different than a lot of other locations that are using these types of things. We don't have combined sewer. We're not under a mandate to, reduce overflows. It's a different tax. It's a different fee here. It's much more nominal in our location than it is in, say, Philadelphia or even, I think, Lancaster, too.
Dan, those were all combined sewers, the three of those?
So I think,
they were.
I think it's a little hard because we don't, having a standardized BMP installation, we're just too small. That's not going to work. But the idea could be adapted to somehow work for us. Maybe we could have that, but it would be at their, they could have a plan, and then they could go find their own contractor. I don't know, something a little bit, because no one's really going to be interested in bidding on properties. 3 installations. We're not going to get the kind of cost savings that a large-scale operation would get by bundling.
So, I mean, one, given the number of properties, which isn't that many, even for $5,000, I mean, what if we just said no? That this doesn't make any sense for us to do?
I like the targeted, on the other hand, because if we would like to approach a commercial property for use of maybe an existing basin, and we go in and do modifications to increase its capacity and its benefits, then we need to have some kind of, I think, some opportunity to make it a partnership, to give them some kind of relief on their fee. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
That tool.
Just that Dan raised, I mean, if you want to talk about the legal issue that came up.
I think the legal issue had to do with if properties are targeted and then they get a credit toward their stormwater fee, which is not necessarily, it's different than a grant. A grant could also lead to a credit. We saw that in Lancaster, so that the private owners that got credits to build green infrastructure projects, they did end up also with a 50% credit on their stormwater fee. But again, those could be separated and we could take the credit off the table. But it's just something we need to be careful about from a legal standpoint, targeting private owners for credits.
I guess I like the credit if it's in a situation that they are now taking over the maintenance, because that offsets the additional maintenance cost. Are we thinking that if we were to do a project on a private, we would take it over? And then you wouldn't really necessarily need that credit because they wouldn't have the maintenance fee. Does that make sense?
So we would pay for the construction and then the maintenance? Is that what you're saying?
I think we would pay for the construction, take over the maintenance, but we'd have to do something to compensate for the value of the ground in some way, like a one-time. Is that what you're saying? You can't do?
Seems like you're doing an awful lot, though, if you're paying for the construction and you're going to maintain.
Well, it would obviously have to benefit us.
It's for us.
It'd be
It's not
offset
for them,
cost.
it's for us. It's
Right.
like basically saying, oh, we don't have to use the library parking lot. We can use yours, commercial property. Are you willing to work with us? And then go in and put your BMPs and et cetera, and then we're the ones who inspect them and make sure they're operating. Because it's what's going to really, the low-cost BMPs aren't these underground storage and things like that. It's peeling up pavement that's not being used. It's a much less costly way to get things done. If we were able to just carve out areas that are impervious and restore them, we could get a lot of water quality as well as, infiltration, things like that, at a very low cost. And that's the kind of thing we haven't really, because we were I do feel, I want to say pressured. We were pressured to put forward large-scale projects. That's why we went the other direction. And I'm not necessarily agreeing that that's the right way to spend our funds.
I think that the issue that we're struggling with is no one else seems to have gone that route. For whatever reason. We don't know enough yet to say why they didn't go that route. But we can't, Dan looked and I looked and we couldn't find anybody else that chose this route. So we need to understand why they didn't go that way. And that's just where we're at right now.
So we could instead just buy easements with stormwater fees. Can we do that? John Rice, where are you?
Well, yeah, so that's where we're at, okay? And I appreciate the comments and I think.
No, I think it's very important to do something that's, that's got some, good
Significant
solid ground
impact.
to go on.
Yeah.
But I
So we'll
think
keep looking.
we have those ideas. I think
Yeah.
ideally, I'd rather see, I know someone brought up 1,000 rain gardens or something, but instead, I'd rather see, 20 improvement projects that reduce flooding by, putting in greenscaping and
Right.
things like that, not big storage underground type things that get very costly.
Yeah, okay.
So one example from Lancaster, this was actually the first project that received a grant through the Penvest program. local business, painting business actually. Their parking lot was in fairly poor condition. They had some localized flooding right at the entrance to their business. And they heard about the program, very excited, wanted to be a part of it, wanted to be, part of something that would help improve water quality in the city. And so they signed up, and what they ended up with was a brand new paved parking lot with permeable asphalt, a bioretention, actually a couple planters, so a number of different small-scale green infrastructure systems. They paid 10% of that construction, again, at unit prices that were probably lower than they would have paid otherwise. And they got reduced flooding, hopefully zero flooding at their entrance. And they are responsible for maintenance. I believe it's 40 years of maintenance. Right.
Sounds like a win-win. They had a need, and they were a willing partner, and that's kind of ideal. And then there could be, just like you're saying, it could be that the parking lot is not in good condition. It doesn't necessarily have to be that there's flooding occurring locally there. But there's plenty of parking lots that could use some beautification, and, it's not that every spot is parked. So there is definitely opportunity to put some, our code now requires trees and green space, but it didn't when those were constructed. So it's not as if they weren't compliant.
So I guess, where do we go
Well, I
from
think,
here at this point?
we want to explore, because it's so new, we just need to look into Regina's approach there to see if there are hurdles that we have to overcome or figure out how it could be
And it may
changed.
not be the right way to do it. It may
Right.
just be that we put money aside for purchasing either easements or right-of-way
Yeah.
things.
I mean,
that-
again, for me, the thing that strikes me is the small number. And it's not like we're going to invest and, create a huge structure to take care of what is probably 50 properties max, in terms of the amount of people who have large sums of money going into the stormwater fees. So it's just not a lot of money. That's the other problem.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That was great, Paul. I appreciate you doing all the legwork on that. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss tonight? Well, I think we hit mostly everything on the agenda. The next meeting is going to be December 10th. If there's nothing else, then I would like, yeah, we did on agenda. We did pretty good tonight. Unless there's anything else, I'd like to close the meeting. All right, have a good evening.